start back at the email.
See if you can get to it.
Okay. You left it under mail, right?
No, it should be under text.
Somebody might want to mute.
I just did.
It's 9 o'clock, Jay. Okay, I think most of us are probably here by now. I'm going to dispense with the roll call in view of the fact that our Commissioner Kevin Wayne has only limited time to speak. Let me start by welcoming everybody to our November panel meeting. We probably have several in the audience that perhaps haven't attended a panel meeting before. Just a few words of introduction for the panel. We are a community organization of Captiva citizens who is formed to advise Lee County on matters of importance, Captiva matters of importance, so that Lee County can manage our community properly, establish the right codes, rules, regulations, and understand what our needs are. We have no real legislative authority other than to make recommendations to the county. This is our monthly meeting. We are going to focus this meeting again primarily on Captiva's recovery efforts rather than make status reports on the various panel projects that are in process. So I would like to begin the meeting by introducing our County Commissioner, Kevin Ruane. Kevin has done what I think is an absolutely fabulous job helping Lee County and our Captiva community come back from this awful hurricane. Kevin, are you around? David, I thought you said he was signed on and ready to go.
He is signed on and he's muted and
Ken Gooderham.
There he is. He's right. He's there. It's just getting set.
Good morning.
Hey, Kevin, Jay Brown, you have been properly introduced, so we are ready to hear your update. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's been an interesting almost 6 weeks since the storm touched down. We obviously are trying to move as quickly as humanly possible. Today at 9:30, the Board of County Commissioners will actually have a decision to make on the 50-50 rule. I know David can go into a lot more details, but essentially we've been told by FEMA that whatever the appraised value is, whether you do it by your own independent appraiser, whether you use the fair market value that's on the county's website, we cannot increase that amount by any more than 15%. And if we do, the flood ratings, not only insurance, but our ratings will be in jeopardy. So we're told to do that. That's probably the most important thing that we're doing right now relative to the storm, trying to give people some clearance and some guidance as they go through and what do I do with my home? Do I rip the sheetrock out? How do I go about this? Essentially, the whole desire from FEMA is to try to avoid putting us back in the same situation and being as vulnerable as we once were. We've had a lot of discussions with them, but they firmly, and it'll be on the record today at 9:30, told us that 15% was the highest tolerance number they would take or allow us to this morning. It gives me great trepidation, but the same token, this is a FEMA government project. This is a FEMA, without them, I don't know how we operate in any way, nor less do we have national flood insurance. So,
but they do get to increase the appraised value 15%. Is that correct? And you can spend half of that.
Correct. Yes. So again, what we're trying to do, understanding the challenges you're going to have to get an appraisal, Jay, will be challenges. So if you get one, great. But for the masses of people throughout the county, I don't know if we have enough appraisers to appraise almost 130,000 properties that have been severely damaged. So I don't know if we'll have that capacity. If you do, great, go get it. Whatever that appraisal number is, probably will be your highest value. You can take whatever that number is, they'll break it down between land and they'll break it down by building. That building number, you can multiply it by 15%. And that'll be your number that you cannot exceed more than 51%. If you do,
Right.
you have to bring it up to code. And that probably would entail elevating your home.
That this is, David's going to explain this in more detail later on in the meeting, but I think the fact that you were able to raise it 15% is very worthwhile.
Well, the other thing that we're able to do, Jay, honestly, what most people can appreciate is we had the look back period waived. So what that means is the last 5 years, if you made improvements, that would actually be subtracted from your building value. So we were able to have that waived as well. So the 15% is important, but to have the prior improvements you did to your home over the last 5 years eliminated from the calculation just gives you the greatest opportunity to try to actually, do the improvements and not have to go through a lot of additional expenses. Our desire is certainly to try to give people the greatest flexibility. We also want them to have the ability to secure and maintain flood insurance. And lastly, we also want to continue to make sure that FEMA pays for this and continues to reimburse us. That's essential. We are in 60 days. That's been authorized for reimbursement. We have submitted a 30-day extension. We're only allowed to do them in 30-day extensions. So we've submitted that. We do hope to have the approval by the end of the week. So that's where we'll be on that. We continue to
Does FEMA normally grant a 30-day extension? Is that normal practice or?
So Jay, really, it's not been many storms that they've gone by past the 60 days. The longest duration was Hurricane Michael up in Bay County, which was 100 days. That's basically what is the most it's ever been given. We're probably going to have to go north of 120. And we recognize that. We recognize the devastation. Yesterday, I toured a good part of Lee County with former Governor Jeb Bush and a whole entourage from Washington to help us with any type of pressure they can obviously apply and continue to make sure we get reimbursed. He obviously was the governor for a long time, understands the whole FEMA process, understands how we go through that. So that's been extremely helpful. The other additional piece of information, Lee County last Tuesday adopted a long-range recovery plan. It's really just the formation of one. So all we did in the first order of business was nominate a chair. The chair is myself.
Right, that's great.
With that in mind, we'll have about 13 different entities that will be part of this. That'll be the main board. And then inside of that, we have what's known as branches. So there'll be branches that we'll identify, and then we'll have sub branches underneath that. So when you get into whether it's building, whether you get into infrastructure, whether you get into housing, natural resources, we will have a branch and then we'll have sub branches underneath it. We're really looking for the people's participation through this whole process. Our job as county commissioners is to obviously to set the policies as the different branches and the research we have becomes to the top, and we obviously move that forward. Secondarily, and probably the most important thing we do is to advocate for the reimbursement and obviously the funding sources. And we have the opportunity to allocate that across the county. So those are our jobs. And as we have it, we're waiting for elections to take place today. As each city will have a seat on the board. 3 of the 6 cities are going through elections as we speak. So there'll be new members of council. There may potentially be a mayor or 2. We will offer a seat to each municipality. We will offer a seat to the school board. We'll have someone from the local delegation, someone from the Constitution's office, someone from the sheriff's office, from fire department, education. I think I've covered them all, but we'll have a set board, and really the seats that occupy, we're really mimicking Bay County. And again, we're trying to go with the subsections and the branches on the main topics being housing, being infrastructure, and build upon there with the sub branches. There was over 750 public meetings that took place for Hurricane Michael with Bay County. They've been extremely helpful in guiding us through what they did right, what they did wrong. The board also indicated that staff should continue to process the day-to-day things that we need to do in Lee County, but we should hire an outside staff to actually do the recovery aspects of this. And that's really what we're on.
Well, this sounds terrific, Commissioner, and I think, David, you're going to be able to brief us a little bit more on the details of this later on in our meeting.
Yep, sure.
Very good.
So I just really wanted to give you the highlights of it. It's a long recovery. I understand that. I'm trying to be as responsive as I can. It's a 7-day-week job at the moment, and I don't really see any light at the end of the tunnel. We're trying to work and navigate through every particular situation. The good news is, Chair, I get to talk to the number 2 and number 3 that report right to the governor. So there's an opportunity to constantly having interactions, constantly having meetings, and constantly just trying to look at how do we do things so we recover. Everybody recognizes that Lee County will recover and pay back on a return on investment 18 to 22 times faster than Bay County did. So they understand the investments are prudent investment and a worthwhile investment. That's really the highlight from the 100,000 foot. David and I speak very often. He can go into a lot more details. Unfortunately, due to the time restraints I have this morning, I have to get upstairs and obviously pass this 50 rule. But if there's any broad questions, I know there's a lot of confusion. The only thing I continue to do is work through, your panel, Jay. David's been really the conduit. Like I said, he and I talk on a very frequent basis. And I try to make sure when Captiva people reach out to my office, Pamela and I have been trying to respond as quickly as possible. I don't think I have any open emails or phone calls I'm unaware of. I've tried to address every single one.
Yes, Kevin, I really, really appreciate your leadership during this, difficult time for the county and, for Captiva. You've been a great help to us, and Captivans are very appreciative of your efforts. Many, many thanks.
My pleasure, Jay. Honestly, this is our community. I obviously asked the county commission to appoint me as chairman of the long-term recovery. I'll go out of the normal rotation, which I find to be administrative in nature, but I really want to be the long-term chairman of this, and it'll be going on for years. So I think continuity is necessary, and it just enables us to understand the clarity as these issues come up. They're complicated issues. I just ask one thing of everybody: just breathe, have a little patience. I think we're doing remarkable, but a storm of this size and the magnitude, I just think is really unprecedented. When I was driving around with former Governor Bush, he really couldn't even fathom how bad this was.
Yeah, right.
And but the good news is we're getting help from all different avenues that you can imagine to help us through this process. The state and the feds have worked well. Today's an election day, which obviously, hopefully that we continue to just be one team working forward through the process as best we can. But that's really my 100,000 foot brief update to your panel, and just rest assured that David Mintz is doing a Herculean job interacting with our office and making sure they have everything.
Okay, well, Kevin, thanks very, very much. We really appreciate it.
My thanks, Jay. You all have a great day. I'll touch base with David after this meeting, and we'll have an opportunity to catch back up.
Okay, good. Many thanks, Kevin.
My pleasure. Take care, sir.
Okay, let's go on now to our, let's see, is Jeff Powell around? I know Jeff wanted to attend this 9:30 meeting of the commissioners. Jeff, are you around or not?
I am this morning, Jay. Good morning.
Okay, good. Do you want to can you make a brief report before you have to leave?
Yeah, absolutely. I can hit those couple points I had sent to you, and then I can always try and log back on after this if anybody had any more questions. But
okay.
But yeah, first couple things. Just want to let everybody know our fire district is back to normal operations and normal staffing. So all of our assistants that was from out of town has all left and gone back. So you'll only see our trucks out there from now on. The next item: any businesses, any commercial, restaurant, stores, what have you, before they're able to open for normal operations, need to have a life safety inspection performed by the fire district. It's the same as what we do on an annual basis for everybody. But we just have to do one prior to you reopening, mainly, because of the circumstances and what could have happened or what people have to do to be open. So you can contact us anytime to schedule that. It's not a big deal. We can come out and assist you and get you guys back open as soon as possible.
Okay, Jeff, do you know if anybody is reopening yet?
Beach stuff and Barracudas is the only one that has that I'm aware of at this point.
Okay,
Debris removal, I'm pretty sure we can all agree it's it's an issue. It's going to be an ongoing one. I just ask from a life safety standpoint that you do your best in guiding your contractors, or if you're doing it yourself, please keep the debris out of the right of way. I
Right.
know a lot of these side streets are narrow as it is, and your properties are smaller on some of those, and it's difficult. But if we can't drive a fire truck down there, and there's a problem, we've already had multiple piles of debris catch on fire. And when there's a problem, if we can't get to it, it's going to cause a bigger problem. So please make sure your contractors are following those guidelines and keeping it off of the roadway. Also away from fire hydrants as well. I think that goes without saying, but do not pile them up near the fire hydrants either.
okay,
Supplies, food, water, restroom facilities. The fire department does not have and cannot supply that to contractors and everybody who's on island. We don't have those supplies. The county has not provided us as a distribution point, which a lot of people have been coming to us asking for. We are not the distribution point for any of the above. We're actually basically out of water for our own staffing at this point. So as everybody comes by and asking for food, water, and ice as contractors, we do not have the ability to provide that for you. We do have, CenturyLink did just set up a Wi-Fi at the station. So if you're in that general vicinity, they're kind of doing it throughout the island, but they just established one at the fire station yesterday. There's 2 signs out front that say which one it is you can connect to. It's free, it's unlocked. You can use it as long as you're in the area. So they just established that yesterday for us.
okay, that's good.
Lastly, we've had a lot of questions about donations coming in both to the fire district specifically and for fire district employees who are affected. Currently, donations are not allowed to be made to specific employees of the fire district that were affected. That's essentially an ethics violation per the state. So we cannot take those for our specific employees. Anybody is able to donate to the fire district specifically, as you would have any other time. You can make a donation at any time to the fire district, just not to specific employees.
Okay.
If that changes in the future, I'll let you know. But we're speaking with our attorney multiple times on it because people have continued to reach out. We cannot accept those at this time.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I'm really happy about that, but I guess if that's the way it is.
Well, Jay, I can tell you as one of the ones who's severely affected by this, I would say, I'm not really happy either, but it is what it is. And that's the guidelines I have to follow at the current time. So if and when that would change, I can reach back out, let you guys know. But as of now, us employees are not allowed to accept donations.
Okay, well, maybe that changes some way in the future.
Yeah. So,
well, Jeff, we really appreciate the work that you've done throughout this hurricane and leading the fire department. Everything the fire department's been done for us has just been, outstanding. So appreciate it.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Are there anybody have any questions before I jump in this county meeting?
Yeah, I had a question, Jeff. It's Bruce McDonald here. In terms of that, your previous comment on the donations, is there any way that is there someone that we can reach out to from a community perspective to lobby for a change?
I would have to look into that and see. I'm sure there probably is some avenue that as residents or owners, people want to make donations. There probably is some manner you could try and go through. I don't know what that is right now, so I'd have to look into it or maybe ask our attorney what they think. I know she was going to try and petition the Commission on Ethics and see under the current circumstances if there was a way around it. I do know the sheriff's department was advertising the way that they were doing it. Basically, donations were being made to a separate nonprofit that was not run by the sheriff's department, and then I guess they were able to make donations. So she was trying to look into any of those avenues, but the way the letter of it read, even being made through a separate conduit like that was still a direct donation. So so yeah, I'll ask her if there's maybe a way of way you guys can go about trying to research it or contact somebody on your own. I can get back to you, Bruce.
Bruce, do you want to take leadership of something like that? See if you can figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, if Jeff, you could give me some, even the attorney's name, I'd be happy to call her. Yeah, happy
Okay.
to do it.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, Jeff, we'll let you go to your meeting. Thanks for the update.
Yeah,
Let's
no
move
worries.
on.
If you want me, if
Go ahead, Jeff.
I can, I'll try and log back on after this ends. And then if anybody had anything that came up in the meantime, I'll try and get back on and just kind of listen on my way back out to the island.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. Thank you for the
All right, guys.
update.
Thank you.
This is Sandy. Can you hear me okay? This is
Yes,
Sandy.
Sandy. Yes.
You know, I was thinking that, you know, because sometimes with nonprofit charities, you can't really earmark to people because it kind of disqualifies it. But maybe through the Captiva Civic Association, it could be a gift and it could be earmarked to go to a Captiva firefighting family. And the donation would go that way. And then you'd have a selection committee that would be a group that would make the decision of who is most needing of that. And that might be a way of getting around it and still doing it totally legally.
Okay. Appreciate that suggestion, Sandy. Makes sense to me. Okay, is Mike Sawicki around?
He sure is. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Good morning.
Hey, how are you? Okay.
Mike?
Sorry, I've got a little bit of a lag here on my end.
Okay.
So I guess the short version of what we've got going on is we're still very busy with active burglary suppression, you know, throughout the day and into the nighttime hours. We're using obviously our island deputies primarily for that. And also that's being supplemented by additional deputies and officers from outside agencies that are primarily on Sanibel, but are making their way up onto Captiva to help us out as well. In addition
Are we
to that,
having looting instances on Captiva, Mike?
well, you know, early on, we had a couple of marine electronic thefts, and we also have one report of a burglary, residential burglary, that's being investigated right now. And so with the number of people we've had on the island in the immediate wake of the storm and through into the recovery, I feel like that's pretty good at this point, especially in view of the fact that there has been some issues in and around Sanibel with similar incidents. So we're doing our best to kind of keep a lot of that trouble off of Captiva.
Well, I think just if you have a visible presence on the street, that would tend to discourage it.
Well, you know, it's a two-part process for the burglary suppression. I can't get into too many details of the operational specifics, but, you know, we do high visibility as a deterrent, but we also do a lot of covert operations as well to try to catch people who might be in the act or creeping around the island. You know, it's great riding around with your lights on and all that. It does deter people from coming on. It reminds them of our presence. But if you have somebody who's creeping around, you lose the element of surprise in there. So we kind of have it as a multi-part, a multi-phase process to address it.
Okay.
The other thing, obviously, we're dealing with is we have a lot of workers and employees on the island, and just trying to keep all of the various behaviors of the different people in line with the community expectation, and also making sure things are safe with the in and among the workers and with that population of employees. A lot of them are from out of town and kind of not a lot to do, and so we're trying to make sure that they're occupied with work and not allowing their attentions to wander.
Do you have any recommendations for homeowners on anything else they might be doing to secure their properties?
Yeah, I mean, now that we're starting to get power back, checking to make sure that to whatever degree you can, your home security systems are working. Things that are particularly valuable to us would be the video systems. Monitored, especially unmonitored, is also good in case we have an incident. We can track back and canvas locations that might have a camera. If you see something that's suspicious to you, call us when you see it. We've had a couple of people say that they had interactions with, contractors or people presenting themselves as FEMA employees that they were a little suspicious about, but it, was something that had occurred in the past. So it's harder for us to find them and interact with them at that point and verify that they are who they say they are. We're on the lookout for any instances of fraud or anybody trying to exploit the situation out here. So yeah, I mean, if you see something that's going on, just call us right away. I mean, as always, we're always out here on the island. We're always available to you. So if you're suspicious about somebody, call us and we'll come and check on it.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Mike, does anybody have any questions for Mike?
Yeah, I got one at Bruce McDonald here. Hey, Mike, are you guys patrolling the beach at all? I mean, the reason I asked that is I've been out I've been on the island here for about a week and a half now, and I've noticed there's probably 4 or 5 homes that have basically got like a bobcat or front end loader, and they're digging out sand out of their backyard and pushing it out onto the beach, and even spreading it out over the beach. And I don't think we want that, and I don't know if we're what we're doing.
Yeah,
about that.
so yeah, the short version is yes, we are patrolling the beach, and we are aware of those locations. We've been, photo documenting them and forwarding them to the State Department of Environmental Protection. And I know that they have actually been out here or at least I guess I shouldn't say they have been out here. They told me they were going to be coming out here during the week. I have not checked to see if they made it out already, to canvass those areas and look at them. And if there's a violation, obviously the homeowners are going to have to deal with the state DEP on that.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah, because my understanding is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, my
I was
understanding.
going to say, can you also? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying my understanding is that there's a permitting process for returning any fill to the beach. And, I know the island has not got a blanket permit for it. So they just need to confirm that individual homeowners haven't obtained that CCCL permit for returning it. My current understanding is that there aren't any permits that have been issued for Captiva on that, unless that's changed in the last couple of days.
Okay. Okay, and then hey, my second question for you, Mike, is I gather now that the bridge restrictions are off, and you sort of can go over the bridge. You can go over the bridge 24 hours a day. How does that square with the curfew rule? Like, so are you allowed to be driving in your car?
What we're doing is, yeah, we're still stopping everything moving during that curfew closure. If you are a resident and you're on your way directly to or from the island, you shouldn't have any problem at least out of the Captiva guys. And I think that squares with what they're doing down on Sanibel and with the out of county agency people. They still don't want people just roaming around. One of the reasons why they changed that restriction is, with a lot of the families moving back, particularly to Sanibel, but even my own included, we have kids that need to be on their way to school or off island before 6 a.m. So that's part of why they've made those changes.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's become an issue too with like people flying down and their flights being delayed and things like that.
Yeah, and we've been pretty understanding on that. You know, if we've got residents and they're, you know, they need to be on the road because they're coming to or from something. But what we really are not allowing and are dealing with is people who either aren't residents that are kind of out just riding around, or, you know, we've had even a couple of cases with like Sanibel residents driving around, and it hasn't really been a big problem. It's mostly been early on, you know, I'm trying to charge my phone, or I needed to get some air conditioning, or, you know, whatever it was, why they were in the car driving around. But nothing that rose to the level of not being able to dispel our fear that they were out committing burglaries or something.
Okay. All right.
Mike,
thanks for clarifying.
Mike, can I ask a question, a little clarity on this? Don't they have to have a Captiva or Sanibel driver's license?
Yes. Yeah. So the passes, the last I heard, again, I'm actually off the island right at the moment, but what I'd heard from the last update was that they were allowing people on and off the island between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. with the passes, with the hurricane passes. You can go to and from your residence and off island with a Sanibel or Captiva driver's license. You have to show that you are in fact a resident, not just a hurricane pass holder, to move on and off the island outside of the curfew. So between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Does anybody else have anything for Mike? Well, Mike, thanks so much for everything that you and your department have been doing during this awful period. Your community really appreciates the work that you do for us.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I really couldn't be more proud of the job that Chris and Christine and again the fire department have done out there. It's really been just really amazing to me, the amount of work that they put in, and no complaining, just rolling up their sleeves and doing hard work. And I love it. It was awesome.
Okay, good. Thanks, Mike. Ken, have we had any questions or comments from the community thus far?
There have been one or two questions that I've answered because they haven't really been applying to the speakers at the time.
Okay. All right. Again, I didn't mention this at the outset of the meeting, but we will try to address any community comment as we move from one agenda item to the next. Okay, I think next on the agenda, we want to go to Diana Wilson from Island Water Association. Diane, are you present at the meeting?
Yes, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can find.
Wonderful.
Thank you for coming, Diane.
My pleasure. Just a few updates about the status of Island Water. Our main office did resume normal business operations on the 24th of October. So we have phone lines open and personnel Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So if there are any questions related to your water services, please feel free to give us a call. Regarding service turn-ons, we're still receiving requests to reestablish water service connections through our website, which is islandwater.com. We have an online form. To date, we have restored services to approximately 3,400 members in both Sanibel and Captiva. Yesterday was a big day for us. We were able to rescind the boil water advisory that had been in place.
That's big news.
Yes, that's quite an effort involving the Department of Health, the local Lee County Department of Health, and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. But we did receive that authorization to do so. And so that was on local media last night, as well as our website. So very good news. Water is available for every purpose that you can think to use it.
Great news, great news.
The last piece of information would just be that we have reestablished our normal operating pressures around the clock. So not that we are 100% normal pre-hurricane status. We certainly are not, but our operations to our membership will look that way. You should see normal pressures and you should be able to use the water as pre-storm. So that's
good.
really my update. We've made a lot of progress and we're quite satisfied with where we are at this point in time.
Well, the community is really appreciative of the efforts of IWA. It's great to be up and running this quickly after this disaster.
Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for Diana, Island Water? Well, Diana, thanks for your report. Thanks very much for doing that and being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Tricia Dorn with LCEC. Tricia, are you around?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Tricia.
Hello. So to date, as of this morning, we have re-energized 1,196 services on Captiva. We still have a remaining 317 without power. So those that we show that cannot be restored, we have placed a phone call to let them know. So if you have not gotten a call from us and you still have no power, I would like to encourage those people to call our office, or most of my people have my email address. Just let us know of your address if that's the case. So, and Ken, I have an update as well that I will send to you if you wouldn't mind sending out to the group. It may be repetitive, but it may be helpful as well at this stage in the restoration. So with that, if I'll take any questions, if you have any.
So Diane, Trish, so people that don't have electrical service now, that's probably due to some fault, on their property, as opposed to a fault with the main lines going down the streets.
Oh yeah, our lines are all energized. If there's no power to a residence or home on Captiva, it's because there's something that needs to be repaired on their side. So once that's been corrected, inspection's been done, just notify us and we'll get the crews out there. And if you haven't gotten a call from us and you still have no power and you think you're just waiting on us to restore, we have looked at every location on Captiva. It's not to say somebody may or may not have been missed. So just reach out to us if there's a question.
Okay, so again, if you don't have power, it's likely a problem on your own property, not an LCEC
Correct.
distribution of power problem.
Correct. That's correct.
If I can add to that, Jay, if you're out at South Seas and you're part of a homeowners association, there are several buildings out here that have power up to the building, but the homeowners associations are not allowing the individual owners turned on yet until they get signed off on. So that's been a drag out here, and it's been a little confusing for a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rest assured, LCEC's got it all fired up.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Tricia.
Yeah.
Awesome job.
Okay. Any questions for Tricia Dorn, LCEC?
Yeah, I have one, Jay. Hey, Tricia, it's Bruce. Hey, question for you. As a result of all the going through this rebuilding effort, is there any lessons learned from LCEC? Is there anything that you guys are planning on doing differently to make the system more resilient in the future? Or is that maybe too early to think about?
Well, that's a really loaded question because every storm is different. And we had Ian, it was 100-year storm. So we really can't prepare for these different types of storms. You either have dry storms, too wet, flooded, too windy. So there's no fail safe. It's lessons learned always. We're always learning from each one of these storms. But do know with Nicole coming up the other coast, we're prepared to respond in case any of you are wondering what we're doing as far as that. We have a lot of crews. We have a lot of brand new infrastructure out there. We're hoping it's a non-event, but we never can tell. But rest assured, we'll be here if anything happens.
Okay. Well, let me be even a little more specific than Bruce was. How about the age-old issue of burying power lines. Is there anything that happened here that would add to the case for burying power lines, or are we
To
still
tell
in the
you-
same place we've always been?
Well,
Pros and cons both ways.
you know, on a storm like Ian, it's a con. The flooding with the underground infrastructure failing over and over again. So, you know, LCEC is reliability neutral. So, but what we learned from each storm is the conditions, right? So this was a wet storm and flooded a lot of the infrastructure with the underground and the pad mounts. So if you have
Okay.
a windy storm, then it's the overhead that gets hit. It just
Right.
depends on the conditions of the storm. So if this was a Wilma, you know, it would have been a different story. So each storm, it's hard to say.
Okay, so but a storm that is primarily a surge event as opposed to a wind event, buried power lines are not helpful. Is that what you're saying?
They're continuing to fail. And what you will see over the next 6 months is sometimes our equipment will not show failure until we put load on it and it's energized. So you may have power, and then if it goes out, it's not uncommon up to 6 months after a storm, because if you put load on it, we will see the destruction that the salt water may have caused to the equipment, but would not show it until we got load on it. So if it goes off, I encourage you to call us, because something may have happened to that transformer. That means it has to be replaced. And that, like I said, it could be up to 6 months after a storm that we continue to see that happen.
Okay.
Hey, let me add to that, because I kind of lived this with Tricia for the last 4 weeks. But there were a couple of points in this storm. One, the substation took a huge hit. I mean, for the first 6-7 days, I mean, they were just getting that up and running and energized. There's a reason that the power lines coming across the Pine Island Sound are up in the air and not underwater, because if those were damaged, it would take weeks, if not months, to get those energized and back. And to her point, if everything was buried, and listen, I'm a buried guy, so I'm not, but if everything was buried, it would have taken 3 to 4 times as long to get lines back up and running, because you got to dig it all up, figure out where it is, and plug it all back in, and et cetera, et cetera.
That's a
So
good
the
point.
substation was a
Bob.
big one.
Yeah, it's a good point. Our guys cannot see under the ground, but they can see up in the air.
Okay.
You laugh, but to an untrained eye, you see nothing. But having worked with these guys hand in hand for the last 2 weeks, they can walk, they can literally go down 7-8 miles an hour down the road and go, oh, that fuse is gone, that transformer's off, that's tripped, that's not. And to me, it's just a pole in the air with wires in it.
Interesting discussion. Okay, does anybody have anything else for Tricia? Well, Tricia, we appreciate you taking time out to be with us this morning. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You guys stay safe.
Okay, let's move on now to Bob Walter. Bob, you have just general update for us and also a specific update on South Seas.
I do. Thank you. I won't talk about power or water because that's been covered, but wastewater is all systems go. There are a couple of lift stations that are still a manual process, but according to FGUA and US Water, no issues at all. So they're fully operational. I do have an update on Comcast. I spoke to them last night. They're still saying the entire island of Captiva will be up and running by mid-December. But I challenged them back and said, what does that mean? To me, that sounds like many areas of the island will be up and running prior to that, and they confirmed that.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're going south to north, which I assume they are, because they had to redo all their fiber coming from the Sanibel side all the way down. So I would suspect if you're from Blind Pass down, you'll probably start to see Comcast and come back up probably in the next 2 weeks. But then if you're in Lands End, if you're on this call from Lands End, I'm sorry to say this, but you might be mid-December with South Seas.
But
So
you
just
feel
FYI.
like mid-December that most people will have their internet service back?
Yeah, Comcast is very comfortable in saying that, which tells me it's going to be before that.
Yeah, okay.
And then out here, it's just clean up. I mean, South Seas didn't start till a week last Monday, but Captiva and South Seas is in full swing with debris cleanup. The only thing I would add on is sort of like Jeff Powell mentioned is, kind of love thy neighbor. I know I'm working with an individual who owns a home on Binder Lane that his neighbor across the street decided to stack all their debris in his front yard and cover his driveway up and everything else right now. So we're trying to get that taken care of. But let's just be cognizant of where we're placing debris. And if you're hiring somebody to move your debris, make sure they understand what to do and how to do it. It'd be very helpful. And then the only other thing I have, it's come up a couple of times in the last day or two, and I'll throw this out to maybe Ken specifically or the panel in general. But has there been any restrictions laid out for winds due to the storm coming across the state on the causeway? I know it's usually 40 miles an hour. Mike Swicky and I talked last night. He said he hasn't heard anything specifically, but some people have told me they've heard 30 miles an hour now. Has anybody heard anything?
No, but I think they're supposed to have, the county's supposed to have an update after the meeting today. They may talk about it there. So I'll try to listen in on that if we can.
Thanks, Ken. That'd be great.
And I have a question for you, Bob, while I've got you. We've had a couple of questions about about when guests might be able to come back to the island in terms of it being open up, I guess, in general, not just South Seas, as well as, but there is also a South Seas question about when you expect some of your amenities up.
We're targeting Q1 to get a couple of the marina up and running and maybe our pool complex, a couple pools. So we're targeting kind of mid Q1 right now. But it's going to be a long haul. As far as having guests on property, I gotta be honest with you, the causeway and the restrictions on that are going to dictate that. And we're all at the mercy of Sanibel. Took a huge hit. I mean, just a huge hit. If you haven't been on island to see Sanibel, it's the total devastation, especially on the West Gulf
Right.
Road side. So they're going to be very, very restrictive on that causeway and who gets across it for quite some time, I think.
Yeah, I've not heard anything different than that. I know I've tried to get some passes for people to start using, the yacht club, which will be opening next week, and they're not granting passes to people who live off island to come, use the club. I think they're, still very concerned about security and the level of devastation that exists throughout Sanibel. You mentioned West Gulf Drive. I've been down West Gulf Drive, and that's just unspeakable. What's the conditions that exist.
It's eye-opening. It's eye-opening for sure.
Yeah.
I would tell you they're being very restrictive, and you know what? If I was in their position, I'd be the same way. But we needed more commercial passes just for team members out here helping clean up and starting to put South Seas back together. And quite frankly, I had to go through Holly, the mayor, and the chief of police. And there was a question and answer session for about 15, 20 minutes of why I need more passes. But I understand why. And I'm appreciative they helped us out.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, it's Bruce McDonald. Do you happen to know, or does anybody happen to know? Like I know in terms of debris pickup, they're doing appliances and construction stuff and sort of vegetation separately. But what about regular garbage collection? Is that where do people on Captiva take their normal garbage now?
Well, South Seas, there are some roll-off dumpsters at the entrance of our conference center there. So they've been there and they've been picked up on a rotation schedule for what they're calling wet trash, which is your normal kitchen trash or what you normally, produce in your house. I do not know if there's a location with a dumpster in Captiva anywhere. I mean, I know I've been throwing it in the back of my Jeep and hauling it down to our dumpsters and just putting it in. And they're free. Go ahead and use them. If you're not part of South Seas, it doesn't matter. Use the dumpsters.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. Ken, have you heard anything about that? Does anybody know if we have any kind of regular, trash pickup resumed?
We've had trash pickup twice.
Really?
On Wednesday.
It's normal?
On Wednesday, last Wednesday, we had trash pickup, and I'm expecting / hoping for tomorrow.
Okay.
I guess put it out, Bruce, see if it goes away. Wednesday.
Exactly.
I know they're not picking, and this is something we need to get out in the community. I know as part of this collection, they are not taking garbage that's in normal garbage bags as part of this debris removal. And there's I see some homes that have a lot of that out in front. So, and I don't know if that's normal garbage or not, but okay, well, if it's tomorrow for the normal trash collection, that's great.
Bob, I had a question from the audience about the ferry to South Seas that was discussed earlier. Is that still in the works or did that go away?
I'm going to explain that in a.
Okay.
I was deferring to David.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. All right, anybody have anything else for Bob?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bob, for that report. Much appreciated. I think we have next on the list is CEPD update from Dan Munt. Daniel, are you around?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Dan.
So I just had a few different items. The first one on the item is, of course, we've received a lot of calls and inquiries regarding the sand removal and debris pickup. I was actually on the phone with Doug Whitehead from Lee County this morning, and he did confirm to me that Lee County will be removing all the sand from all the roads on Captiva, not just the county maintained roads. There are trucks currently out there working towards the removal of the sand. Crowder Gulf will be removing the hard debris. He just asked that as much as possible that the residents try to separate the regular debris from the sand, because there are two different trucks that pick them up, so it'll make it more difficult for them.
But Dan, you did say that they're starting now to pick up sand?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
He did ask for patience because there may be multiple passes needed to remove it all, but it is in the works. And he did
So,
also
Dan,
inform me that I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll ask the question when you're finished.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And he did also inform me that residents, if you do have large piles of sand on your property, you can put them to the edge of the right of way to be removed by the county. So that's my update on the debris. The other thing I want to talk about, if there's no questions on the debris, is apportionment.
I have a question on debris.
Go ahead, bud.
Dan, when we spoke yesterday, Tween Waters, not Tween Waters, excuse me, just from location only. In front of Tween Waters, there was a front end loader that was taking that sand and pushing it up on the dunes. And they actually cut a new path through a dune to the beach. That's the county?
That has been confirmed to me to be Lee County. I'm still looking into that and reaching out to Kelly Kramer and trying to get to the bottom of that. I don't have full answers.
They're not supposed to be doing that, are they?
No.
No, there is a permit that can be obtained to place the sand if it's been verified as clean onto the exposed revetment area. I'm not sure. I can't confirm that it's been done. I'm still looking into this. I'll likely find out this afternoon.
Okay.
Dan, this is John. I have a question. Will they be going back into Sunset Captiva down all the way to the back?
My understanding from talking to Doug Whitehead is they're going to be doing both private and county maintained roads.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So I'd also like to talk about apportionment because our office has received a flood of calls regarding the letter that was sent out for the assessments for the previous beach nourishment. That letter was delayed a bit due to the hurricane. It was sent out just before the hurricane. So if any of the property owners are intending to make a full payment of the assessment at 0% interest, we ask to receive that payment by December 15th to our PO box. If you're intending to elect to make the amortized payments, you don't have to take any action. That'll come from the tax collector with the tax bill. And the other item that I have to update everybody on is we did announce vacancy to seat 1 beginning in January. If anybody is interested in becoming a commissioner, please reach out to me. I'll provide you with the proper form and answer any questions regarding, the qualifications and any of those other items. But we will be receiving applications for that and electing a commissioner or appointing a commissioner in January.
Okay, so that means an existing commissioner is resigning, or?
No, sir.
I had COVID and I got screwed up and I didn't do the right paperwork. That's the truth.
Oh, so you have to run again, Linda?
Yeah, because I screwed up.
Okay,
Okay?
all righty. So that's Linda Laird's seat.
Yes.
Okay,
Just because of the paperwork mix up, we have to go through the appointment process in total.
Dan, I had a question from the audience about water quality, safety and swimming. Have you heard anything from the Department of Health on that?
I have not heard anything specific from the Department of Health, although from watching the news, I have seen instances of the flesh-eating bacteria. I don't think that there's anything on Captiva. I personally, I would exercise an abundance of caution until you hear that it is safe, but I have not heard anything official on that.
okay. Anything else for Dan?
Hey, yeah, I have one. I personally have not received an apportionment letter, and I've talked to a few other folks on the island and they don't have them. And so I'm just wondering if they're in the Captiva, my PO box on the island here, and they didn't get transferred to the new pickup spot, or they're lost in the mail. But I know of 2 or 3 other people that have asked me if
Yeah,
I've
I don't
got it.
have one. I don't have one.
So, yeah, so I mean, I think maybe we need to think about sending out something, sending another one, or is there somewhere we can send an email into to get another copy, Daniel?
Sure, I have digital copies of all the letters. If anybody has not received theirs and are interested in doing so, if you please just reach out to me, I'll provide you with your individual letter.
Okay. Well, maybe like in our notice of the meeting, we can just put that in, Jay, like what Daniel's email is, so the community can get their stuff. But I've talked to several people that don't have the letter.
Right.
We've received some requests from our website through the contact us portion for people to request those letters, and I've provided a few already. So maybe this problem is a little bit more widespread than I've been made aware of previous.
Okay, Ken, could you put out a notice to everybody on our email list that if you haven't received, your apportionment letter, what to do about it?
Yeah, Dan, does it go to dmunt@mycpd.com?
Yes, please. And just for clarification, we do mail those out to the address on file with the property appraiser. We don't have our own individual address list. We utilize the property appraiser's list.
Okay.
But if you're requesting an email, obviously I'll send it to the email that you request.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
I had next on the agenda, a wildlife update from Carrie Schumann. Is Carrie here?
I am here.
Okay, Carrie, the floor is yours.
Hi, folks. And just by way of introduction for some of our participants, I'm the Coastal Resilience Manager at SCCF. So I was asked to give an update for SCCF, but also to gather a couple updates for Crow and Ding Darling. So I'm going to combine those.
Good, thank you.
Absolutely. So for Crow, what they let me know in order, the info to share is that they were very fortunate that their buildings on the island are still standing. All staff and animals were safe. Days after the storm, they had patients, their wildlife patients, in hotel rooms or at staff housing. The patient care never stopped. The staff has been able to go out to island to clean what they can and to get supplies for patients. They're in contact with electricians and contractors to get everything back up and running. In the meantime, they are operating temporarily out of North Fort Myers. The Animal Refuge Center allowed them some use of their old buildings on their campus, and they have set up an ICU area as well as a rehabilitation area to continue their patient care there. Before that happened, they did triage at Blue Pearl, and they sent their stable patients to the Conservancy in Naples. Other wildlife patients were transferred to different wildlife facilities throughout Florida. They are taking patients in again and have, and they really appreciate the support they've received from their community and people all over the world. They say a thank you isn't enough. If anyone is interested in volunteering, and I plan on providing some of this information to Ken so he can share some of these details with folks, but if anyone is interested in volunteering, they can email the volunteer coordinator. I will provide that address to Ken to share. And they suggest, as always, if you do find an injured animal, certainly give them a call first. So they still have the capacity to deal with injured animals out on the island. So those are the updates for Crow. Next is Ding Darling. So these came directly from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife staff. So they do note that all their employees were accounted for and safe in the storm. They do describe the way that they responded after the storm was U.S. Fish and Wildlife had a couple different teams that were involved. They had a law enforcement team, something that they call a special operations response team that did initial inspections. They also had an incident management team that included service employees that specialized in heavy equipment, law enforcement, and incident management. So they ended up helping with emergency response around Lee County. They helped clear roadways in Sanibel, and then they responded to the needs of their own personnel during that time. They do suggest that they will be doing a biological assessment to really understand the impacts to Ding Darling, but they do caution that, of course, that will take some time. But that is in the works to understand, how Ding Darling was impacted. They are closed. From what I understand, they will remain closed until further notice, but they will coordinate with the city of Sanibel in terms of, opening any facilities. They do note that every refuge structure in Ding Darling did sustain some kind of damage. They did want to share that the refuge is not accepting volunteers at this time. This includes both local volunteers and recreational vehicle volunteers. But they did want to highlight the Friends group, so the Ding Darling Wildlife Society. I know that Bird G. Miller, who is this executive director for that, is certainly willing to give updates in the future to this group. But that would be the group, if folks are interested in volunteering, that would be your best bet, is to reach out to them. I don't know exactly where they're at with volunteer status. So those are the updates for Ding Darling. And last, I'll give an SCCF update and include a couple wildlife details. So in terms of SCCF, right after the storm, we ended up contributing a lot of resources for search and rescue and other immediate emergency response needs. But we were able quite quickly to start becoming involved in some of our scientific and conservation efforts. So we were able to, the director of our marine lab was able to go out with FGCU, and they were able to start doing some water quality assessments in terms of nutrient levels and have been monitoring some of the red tide data. I know folks are probably really interested in sea turtles and how Ian impacted our sea turtle nesting. So the good news on that end is that we were at the very tail end of nesting season when the hurricane came in. So there was 17 active nests right before Ian came in. Our sea turtle team was able to locate one nest after the storm. They are monitoring it. I don't know that they expect to see successful hatchlings from that nest, But again, this was at the tail end of sea turtle season. It's estimated about 36,000 hatchlings were able to emerge from nests prior to this. So, so this shouldn't be as impactful as if this had happened earlier.
Okay, so 17 nests is not a big number then.
No, not compared to what was able to successfully happen earlier in the
Okay.
season. Yes. So we really are lucky in terms of our timing of when this all occurred. In terms of birds, the birds are doing pretty well from what we understand. Some of our banded birds have been resighted in some of the local areas, and we're pretty hopeful that they'll be able to continue their normal activities, and that the beaches will recover enough for the next nesting season. In terms of some of our sort of more interior wildlife, so for instance, our turtles and some of our more freshwater species, I know we'll keep folks posted. The concerns there, especially for example, some of our turtle species, our non-sea turtle species, is that when the storm surge came through, a lot of the areas that have traditionally been freshwater are now very saline. And because we're entering into the dry season, the concern is that we may not recover that fresh water. And so that may influence how well some of our species continue to do. So that's something we're continuing to monitor and try as best we can to help problem solve a bit around, but that is a concern. I will highlight, this is something that you folks shared in your update, but we did a citizen science effort that I believe we're still continuing, which is if folks are seeing wildlife sightings, and again, we can reshare this info, but we have a form you can fill out with photos and information on the sighting. So that helps us understand how wildlife is responding since the storm. And last, I just want to give a quick update about us and our facilities. So for our staff, all staff were safe. About a third of our staff did live on the island or places that were impacted and, have had to find alternate housing or are problem solving around that. Some of our facilities got through the storm pretty unscathed. Others were significantly damaged. For some of those, we have structure that's still standing, but lost a lot of the equipment inside. Some buildings are a loss. So for intern housing, likely a loss, at least one of those buildings collapsed. So primarily, we're spending a lot of time responding to that. We're sort of in a response mode. So we're doing a lot of mucking out of our facilities, cleaning up our grounds, those sorts of things, kind of getting ready for that mitigation that's starting to occur on some of our buildings for mold and water damage. And we've also been getting out and helping in the community. So in instances where we've known of folks that need a hand, whether it's cleaning up helping to move appliances to the curb or cleaning up yards. So with that being said, we also wanted to extend, essentially we knew of some folks, especially on the Sanibel side, who needed that help. And James has been keeping his ear open for opportunities or folks who might need the same, who are very much in need of that on Captiva. He hasn't been aware of any instances, but this might be a good opportunity if you, or if there's someone else that could benefit from a few hours of, essentially we could have a team of folks that can provide a few hours of help. So I'll make sure that my email's in one of the next updates. And we've also gotten a lot of questions about volunteering with us. I think much like the other groups, we're not quite ready to have volunteers in an organized manner. So what I might do is come up with a form where folks, if they're interested, can provide us with their names. And when we're ready to do a coordinated and sort of thoughtful response where folks can help, that's when we can certainly reach out. And I think that's really my update. So I just want to see if there's any questions that I can respond to.
Any questions for Carrie? Carrie, very much appreciate that update. Thank you so much.
Yep, happy to provide.
Okay, next up, David, did you have some other updates you wanted to make?
Yeah, I have 5 quick ones.
Okay.
First one is on the ferry. When the bridge came down, And we thought it would be a year before the bridge, the Causeway Bridge would be rehabilitated and would be operational. We had worked with the county to try to develop a ferry service that Captiva Cruises, using their two boats, Santiva and Playtime, would be able to ferry people back from the mainland to Captiva and back from Captiva to the mainland. And Captiva Cruises was good enough to develop contracts for that particular service. And we even worked with Port Sanibel Marina, which is owned by Royal Shell, and they were very good to provide us an embarkation point at Point Sanibel. The two contracts for the Port Sanibel Marina and the Captiva Cruises were supplied to the governor's office for approval for FEMA payment. And because the bridge was reopened, and because it was reopened so quickly, and because it was reopened at such an expense, that the governor's office felt that the need for a ferry service would not be as great as it would have been if the bridge wasn't reopened. And therefore they, because of their priorities and fiscal restraints, could not fund and would not fund the ferry service at this time. That decision just came down this past weekend. It may be correct that there's no need for a ferry service because of the bridge reopening. We found that the Lee Trans, which is doing transportation from Sanibel to Captiva and Captiva back to Sanibel, which was provided by the county, has not been used very much, and therefore they suspended Lee Trans service because of its lack of usage. So it may be the governor's office is correct about the lack of a need for a ferry service at this time. My understanding is that Commissioner Ruane may appeal that decision because he feels a ferry service would be good for the recovery of Captiva. The point I want to make here is that we really have to give a shout out or a round of applause or whatever word you want to use to Captiva Cruises. They were devoted to this island. They were devoted to Captiva. They forego other opportunities that they could make monies because they were hopeful they could provide a ferry service for Captiva. And that didn't come to fruition. And I just want the community to know that Captiva Cruises put the interests of the community above their particular financial interests when trying to create this ferry service. And I just want people to understand that. That's number one. Number two, county property taxes. Governor issued an executive order. It's 22-242 for homes that were completely destroyed or otherwise rendered uninhabitable. The property taxes that were due normally on November 1st are now been changed to January 1st, 2023. So there's a 3-month hiatus for the payment of property taxes. That the 4% deduction or reduction that you got when you paid in November, that would continue now so long as you pay by the end of January. The order says completely destroyed or otherwise rendered uninhabitable. I'm not quite sure what that means at this point. I suspect it would mean most of the county, but I don't know for sure. But we will try to find out. Ken will put something on the website to see if that'll apply to all residents on Captiva. The other thing people have to know.
Well, David, have property tax notices even been sent out?
I don't know. I think some people have gotten them. I think some people haven't, but regardless, they don't have to be paid until January 1st, 2023, Jay.
Okay.
If your house is, and I'm being specific here, if your house is, quote, completely destroyed or, quote, otherwise rendered uninhabitable, we will try to find out exactly what that means and if that applies to Captiva. If you couldn't get over the bridge, if there was, you could only come by boat, or your house was flooded, that I suspect that means otherwise rendered uninhabitable. We want to clarify that, but I just want people to know that that executive order came out. The other thing that I think Ken put on the website is that beginning today, hurricane passes will be issued not at the Crown Plaza, but at the Title Group of Fort Myers office, located inside the RE/MAX building at 7910 Summerlin Lakes Drive. And you can get those hurricane passes from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. except Tuesday, when it'll be 9 to 5, and it's closed during the lunch period from 12 to 1 p.m. Again, that's 7910 Summerlin Lakes Drive if you need a hurricane pass, not Crown Plaza. And the last thing, the fourth thing was just people should know that Dock Fords is not going to reopen at South Seas. I think that's been, people on Captiva, some of the people know that, but a decision has been made that Dock Ford's is not going to reopen on South Seas. I don't know what will replace it, but people should know that. And the last thing I just want to say before we get to the presentations is that I think the panel owes a special thanks to Ken Goodaham, and I think the community does. He has been responsible for putting all the stuff on all the emails, all the websites from the Captiva Community Panel, updating people with all the information. And he has done a job far and beyond our expectations. And I just think Ken deserves our appreciation. And
Absolutely, absolutely, David. Thanks for mentioning that.
David, I have a question for you from the audience. What if we need ferry service for guests who want to come and support Captiva by renting there because Sanibel won't allow access to their roads?
ask that question one more time, Ken, please.
What if we need the ferry service for guests who want to come and support Captiva by renting on the island to circumvent the problem of Sanibel not allowing access?
I think that's a very good question, and that is why Commissioner Ruane is going to be appealing to the governor's office to see if we can, notwithstanding what basically the Florida Office of Emergency Management rejected the contracts because they felt there wasn't a need. I think Commissioner Ruane believes there's still a need, particularly with respect to the recovery. And that's what you're talking about, is recovery, people coming to the island for whatever reasons, and guests, et cetera. And so that appeal will be made, and we'll have a sense by the end of next week that appeal will have any legs.
And then there was another comment that as of this morning, property taxes have yet to be posted to the Lee County website. And I'm trying to remember, I don't know that I've seen a property tax notice either. So they may have been delayed. I'll look into it.
What we'll do is we'll put on the website the executive order, Ken, and then we'll try to understand what completely destroyed and otherwise rendered uninhabitable means, okay?
And we should also put out that new location to get hurricane passes.
Yes.
Hey, David, this is John. Hey, is there a chance Captiva cruises could be reimbursed for the time and they went through trying to get these permits?
I think that we as a community should do whatever we can to help Captiva cruises during this period, because of again, what sacrifice and I think they made for us. And so I'm going to speak with them about, there may be FEMA lost business opportunity, FEMA money is available. I've spoken with Sanibel, or Sanibel Marina. They're still interested in working with Captiva Cruises, even if it's not reimbursed by the state or the federal government, to set up some sort of ferry service, if that's possible, in response to the last question. And so I think, and Bob Walter and I have talked about this in terms of South Seas, I think there has to be an effort to make sure that Captiva Cruises maintains its viability going forward.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate it.
Anything else for David? Okay, I think, David, we've reached the point where we'd like to give everyone a brief education on the 50% rule, make sure everybody, or no, I think we're going to move on to public adjuster now.
Yeah.
We're all making insurance claims. I know I've heard that there are called public adjusters around that if you're not happy with the way your insurance company is treating you, or you have questions about your insurance company, that there are, quote, public adjusters available to work with you on your claims. And I know you were going to try to set up an informational presentation on what a public adjuster is and how they work.
Yes, we've been asked Michael Fusco of Iron Claim, who is a public adjuster, who also, my understanding, he can tell us, teaches issues surrounding these insurance issues at various universities in our area, or in Georgia or Alabama or wherever it is in the South that he does this. And so I'd like to introduce Michael. He's right there in the center of your screen. And what we've asked Michael to do is give our community a basic overview of what a public adjuster does, how he or she does it, and why one may or may not want to use a public adjuster, and basically how would you make that decision based on your own particular needs. So Michael's right there, and he's been kind enough to make this presentation for us.
Michael, thanks for doing this for our community. It's much appreciated. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much to David and to the community. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Michael Fusco, and I am the founder and CEO of Iron Claim. We are a national public adjusting company. I've been doing this for 43 years, and as David has mentioned, I teach insurance and risk management at the universities of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and Alabama. My focus today is to explain the public adjusting industry and how we work in relation to identifying and helping the homeowners, business owners decide and navigate the insurance claim process. First of all, I think what I lay out to everybody is the fact that we're here to be informative and not solicit business, but to be a community service tool. One of the things that I say to everybody is you have just entered into something you never wanted to, and that's the disaster recovery industry. And as you have seen, out there on the road, there's these big, large trucks and mitigation companies, and everyone is there to quote unquote help you recover from this process. However, the only people that are actually licensed by the state of Florida to help you as an individual and a business is a public insurance adjuster. Public insurance adjusters are licensed not only in this state, but mostly throughout the country as an advocate for the insured in helping them prepare and present their insurance claim. The reason that public adjusters exist is that when you have a disaster, you, me, and your insurance company all have one thing in common. And do you know what that is? They have no idea how much money they owe you. What they do know is that they have an insurance policy, and that policy is X amount of dollars, but they don't know how much of that policy they owe you. In the 43 years that I've been in the business, I've developed the Mike Fusco axiom as to how to get from A to Z in the claim process, and that it is a process. And the community as a whole right now is probably at D, E, and F, in that when you have a disaster, the first and most the immediate step is the mitigation phase. And when you deal in the mitigation phase, this is when you come across the mitigation contractors, and contractors want you to sign what's known as an assignment of benefits contract. People have asked me, do you engage a public adjuster early in the process, or do you wait for an offer, and so on? Well, let me throw out a couple of points where I believe public adjusters work very well from the beginning. First of all, when you have a mitigation company approach you and they say, hey, please hire us and we'll do the demolition and we'll tarp your house and you don't have to worry about any of this because the insurance companies will pay for that. Well, that's true if in fact you have insurance. And many people at the early stages engage mitigation companies thinking that this was work was going to be covered, and then they found out that you had to have very specific coverage for both flood and wind in addition to your homeowner's policy. Because when you purchase insurance, you're purchasing protection against perils. And the perils, like in the old cartoon, the perils of Pauline, are things like wind and water and flood and lightning. And in the case of coastal properties, the coverage is very specific in that you have to have purchased flood insurance to have your flood damage paid for, and you have to have wind damage to have the wind damage paid for. So when you're entering into a contract, if the mitigation contractor has not reviewed your policies, then if you look at the second paragraph of these assignment of benefits contracts, what it says is that any work that is not specifically covered by the insurance company, you agree to pay for. And so obviously you could be looking at a large expense if you don't understand what your coverages are. Public adjuster's job is to review the insurance coverages and advise their client as to the bounds of their coverage and then how the claim process works moving forward. Because in a disaster, you have the mitigation phase, which is protecting your property from further damage and so on. And that will soon come to an end. And at that point there, you'll move forward into the claim process. And in developing my axiom, I've said that there's really only 3 things that determine how much you get paid from your insurance company. The first and the most important we've talked about, the insurance policy. What's covered, what's not, and what are the challenges? The challenges as it relates to a hurricane claim is that in addition to specific coverages, you also have high deductibles. Anywhere I've seen from 5% of the amount of insurance to 10% of the amount of insurance. So obviously, if you have a high value home and or business, and you're looking at a 10% or 5% deductible, you could be looking at $500,000 in terms of self-insured levels before you engage in the insurance recovery dollars. Now, when you look at the mitigation companies, and then we'll move on from there, the mitigation industry is a disaster industry, and they travel from place to place to place, much as the public adjusting industry travels place to place to respond to the public. However, these companies have an enormous markup, a much higher markup than your local vendors. Now, that's a pro and a con, and I'll get to that pro aspect of it when we get into the claim process. But the con is that, the markup can be anywhere from 40 to 50% of what your local vendors would charge. Now, obviously, many of the local vendors weren't able to respond because they were taking care of their homes and their families and businesses, and the gap was filled by the national companies. But what happens when you meet these national companies is they let you think you're not in America anymore. And by that, I mean, you never sign anything without knowing how much you're going to spend. You never purchase anything without asking 4 or 5 of your friends how much it should cost. And when you deal with mitigation companies, whether it's in the mitigation part of the claim or the rebuild part, you should engage and ask them for things like, hey, if you're going to do my demolition at my house, I would like to get a not to exceed estimate. And you're perfectly within your right to ask for that because it's America and it's commerce. And then when you agree to a number for whatever task, whether it's doing your roof or doing the muck out of your property, on that assignment of benefits form, I would be very specific in writing those amounts on that form and make it a form specific to only the task that mitigation company has been involved in. Because these assignment of benefits documents are wide ranging, and basically they would take the place of the insured in the claim process and then dictate the terms to your insurance company. And I really don't think that's the intent of the insured in engaging these people. They just want a immediate recovery and mitigation. The other thing that I would recommend in these forms is that you make sure that you, as the insured, are named as a joint payee on the checks that would be sent to the mitigation company. The reason for that, obviously, is that number one, you want to be happy with the work that they did. And number two, you want to make sure that they completed the contract and the task that you discussed with them. And so that by putting your name on their check, and it won't appear unless you specifically ask, you will then maintain that balance, that check and balance, to make sure that the tasks at hand are in fact been taken care of. So this is another reason why I believe that working with a public adjuster from the beginning gives you the added benefit of understanding the process and having an ally to level the table with the mitigation companies. Now, let's leave the mitigation companies and move to the actual claim process. When we talked about my axiom of the 3 components, the first being the insurance policy, what many people don't realize is that in the insurance contract, and it's a contract, it's up to you as the insured to prove to the insurance company what you lost. We've all heard of this phrase, I'm going to put in a claim. Well, what's happened in the years is because this is not the insurance company's first rodeo, Rather than waiting for you to put in a claim, they bring in all of their people. They have adjusters, they have engineers, they have forensic accountants, they have building consultants. And all of these folks are there to aid the insurance company in determining what they owe you out of that insurance policy. The fact is that the person who is ultimately going to make the decision on how much to pay you is never, ever coming to your home. They are going to be sitting at the home office of whatever insurance company you're dealing with and only dealing with reports that are sent from their people to the insurance company. Now, the way to set a claim up for success is to understand that and focus on the home office adjuster and that presentation. Within 24 hours after the insurance companies look at your home, they're required to put in what's known as a reserve. This reserve is the professional guesstimate as to how much they are ultimately going to owe you. I would engage the adjusters and ask them, what is the reserve on my claim? If they haven't told you, I would try to get the reserve from the desk adjuster. And the reason for that is that if you and your contractors have met and you're thinking your damage is $1 million and the reserve for the insurance has been put in at 500,000, and you do have coverage of up to $1 million and higher, then already the claim is set up for a problem because the two parties are not aligned. And obviously the home office, I tell folks, insurance companies have two things. They have all the time and all the money. So if you don't set your claim up with a proper reserve and make sure that the insurance company feels like they are getting a good deal and you are getting a good deal, that's when claims tend to grind to a halt. That's why people say, well, I'd like to wait for an offer before I engage my public adjuster. And, that's a business practice that y'all can take because, logic would dictate that makes sense. What the deviation from logic is that the home office person has expectations. And from that reserve, they're going to get reports from their field people that make them comfortable with that reserve over this period of time. So if you then at some point submit an estimate and it's $1 million and their reserve is 500,000, that's when the wheels start to come off and they send even higher level experts out to find out, hey, why is my guy so wrong? And you're so right. What a public adjuster should do is to set the reserve so that if they believe that the loss is $1 million, the reserve is at $1.5 million, because now as the insurance company issues a check for $1 million, they feel like they have saved $500,000. And again, they have all the time and money, and they want to have a good deal for both parties. The second and third components of the claim process is the scope of work and the pricing. The scope of work is what do we need to do to repair the house? So when somebody says, I'm going to replace the roof, does that mean the paper and the shingles, the paper shingles and the deck? It's an open-ended question, right? So a public adjuster's job is to meet with the insurance company and make claim for the damages that you've sustained. A good example is a metal roof. Your metal roof may in fact be intact, but because of the winds, it has lifted, it has broken the seal between the bolts that adhere to the roof. And even though it may look fine, it may have sustained damage enough to be replaced. A licensed public adjuster with knowledge of this incident will be able to get you paid for the damage that you have sustained. Because that first item that we talked about, the insurance policy, is based on what's known as the principle of indemnity. What that means is that if you have lost something, you should be paid for that. Our job as public adjusters is to generate a check directly to the client so that they can then do what they always do, take the money and then, independent of the insurance process, deal with the vendors that they want and that they trust. Because the third component of the insurance process, the axiom of Michael, is the pricing. So we in the industry use the insurance company's adopted estimating platform known as Xactimate. And in Xactimate, those prices are updated every 30 days. The problem with Xactimate is that it has a disconnect as to what goes on in the market. If you Google a term called demand surge, what happens is immediately after a large event like this, the pricing goes up a minimum of 30%. It's such a recognized phenomenon that Lloyd's of London actually has in their policies a cap on how much they will pay in relation to a demand surge. However, the work has to be done. So as a public adjuster, not only do we monitor the changes in the Xactimate pricing, but we check those against the realities of what's being charged in the field. And what I will tell you is that that bubble of the demand surge has not yet hit its peak. And the reason is that even though people are doing work, no money has entered into the market yet, or very little, maybe advances and so on. And even though you're competing against for labor, when the money really starts coming in, the bigger projects are going to have a lot of money. And the guy they were paying $20 for labor, as he's getting in his truck to come over, gets a call and says, I want to be paid $25 now. And so what you want to do is to be able to make sure that you capture your settlement at the top of the demand surge dollar amount and have a check generated to you, so that independent of that process, you can then meet with your contractors to negotiate a repair cost that hopefully will have enough to do the work that you need done. So in a real brief outline, I know I've gone a minute or so over, public adjusters are licensed by the state. You can find public adjusters through the internet or through the local state association, the Florida Public Adjusters Association, or through the National Association of Public Insurance Adjusters. There is a process that you are involved in that has a mitigation stage and then a reconstruction stage, and that the three major components that determine how much you're going to get paid in a claim is the insurance policy, what's covered and what's not, the challenges that exist in those policies, the scope of work, and the pricing. Last point is that many people ask me, how does flood and wind relate to one another? The flood insurance company and the wind insurance company are two distinct companies, and the line of demarcation between the payment is the flood line in your building. The rule of thumb is that if you have a less than 2 feet of water, then the flood company will pay for 2 feet. If you have a 2 foot 1 inch water line, then the flood insurance company will pay for 2 inches, or pardon me, up to 4 inches, or pardon me, 4 feet. If you have 4 feet 1 inch, they will pay for the whole wall, but they won't pay for the ceiling unless the ceiling has been touched. Once you have that line of demarcation, then you will deal with the wind company on any of your top-down damages. In order for the wind company to respond, you have to have a break in the exterior envelope of the building. What that means is roof damage, siding damage, broken windows, broken glass, and that will then initiate the wind coverage for your property. And a public adjuster's job is to work with both companies to marry those two buckets, if you wish, of coverage, to make sure that you collect everything that you're entitled to. I want to thank you very much for the time. I'm sorry I went over a little bit. And,
no, this has really been informative. I really appreciate it. Is there any licensing or organization or way a person could know if he wants to hire a public adjuster that he's getting a good professional public adjuster as opposed to, I don't know, an ambulance chaser or something like that?
Well, I tell everybody, you know, it's a terrible term and there are no ambulances here, right? We've responded to a hurricane. What I would ask them for is their state license. I would ask them for references. I mean, we were here in 2004 and we're working for all the people we were working for then. Unfortunately, many of the people that we worked for don't have insurance due to, you know, business decisions on the cost of insurance. You can also vet that company through the state organization, which is the Florida Association of Public Insurance Adjusters or the National Association of Public Insurance Adjusters. Those people will be able to comment. But I think that, you know, getting references is the most important thing. And one other point on that, you know, if you think about it, you don't have the ability to ask the adjuster who the insurance company send out, either from the wind or the flood, for his CV, right? You don't know if he's the brightest star in their insuring tree or just the last guy they put a red jacket on and sent him out onto the field, right?
Right.
However, with a public adjuster, you'll be able to vet him by checking out references and his ability, and even with the DOI, the insurance department, you know, there and any negative marks. But there are a lot of very good professional public adjusters out there, but unfortunately, like in every industry, there's bad ones too. So I would say do your homework.
Okay, good.
Michael, could I just ask one question? As I'm sure the community is just curious, how does a public adjuster get paid?
So that's a very good question, David. Public adjusters get paid a percentage of the claim settlement. The Florida has put into our general agreement that it cannot exceed 10% of the settlement amount. And you should not pay a public adjuster until they generate a settlement check. Now, it is customary, however, if you've engaged a public adjuster from the beginning and they negotiate a advance, that you would pay him his percentage out of the advance and any other payments as they proceed through the settlement process. But that is the reason that I like that scenario, is that in addition to the homeowner, the public adjuster is as motivated as you are to get the claim settled, because nobody wants the claim to go on for a long time. And one other thing I would say is people say, and there's the fallacies, is that, well, if you engage a public adjuster, your claim's going to slow down. Well, I can tell you that my experience is quite the opposite. We know exactly what needs to be claimed. We use the insurance company's estimating platform. In the case of our firm and several others, we use three-dimensional mapping known as Matterport drones, so that that person we talked about at the home office, the claim for our client leaps off the page and they see why the reserve is right and why they should pay accordingly.
Michael, I have a couple questions from the audience.
Yes.
First one is, are remediation contractors paid directly by our insurance company?
Well, they're paid directly by your insurance company if you have signed the assignment of benefits, because that is exactly what you are signing, is a document that enables the vendor to go directly to the insurance company and then check to go directly to the vendor. That's why I recommend that you add the caveat that you need to be named as a payee on that check, because otherwise you won't know two things. Number one, you won't know the amount of payment. And number two, you won't know when the payment is issued. And so, you know, and the other thing about the mitigation companies, this work is not free work. So if you have a limit of insurance, it comes out of the insurance dollars that you have. The mitigation work is not in addition to your amount of insurance. So for instance, if the market rate to muck out a house is $20,000 or $30,000, you should be paid that amount. And then you can decide to pay the restoration contractor that amount, or you should get a check for $20,000 or $30,000 and use your local contractors and so on to do that work.
Okay, next question is about loss of use. Is that a public adjuster item?
Yes, it can be. If number one, the loss of use, first of all, has to be in the portion of the policy that is covered. So if you only have a flood claim and you do not have loss of use coverage, you will not receive that benefit. If you have wind coverage and you have loss of use, you have to have initiated wind damage by showing a break in the exterior envelope of the building. The next thing is in addition to the damage, you have to determine what's known as the period of indemnity. The period of indemnity is based on how severe the repairs are. So if you've lost 2 shingles, the period of indemnity is going to be, you know, like a week. But if you have a severe damage, the period of indemnity could be a year or the full policy limit. In that case, you would make that claim accordingly based on the historical rental information and or use that you have of the building.
And the final question I've got, well, another one just popped up, so hang on a second. Recommendation, if the HOA and insurance adjuster do not agree on coverage of trim and doors, each says the other should cover it, who does the homeowner turn to?
So when I said that there's three components that determine how much you get paid, in the case of an HOA and also in a business, there is a 1A to that. And that 1A is either the condo documents or your lease. The condo documents and or your lease will define a quote unit in the case of a HOA, or in the lease, the insurable interests line of demarcation between the building owner and the merchant. And so that the same exists in the HOA. You go to the condo docs and that will define a unit. And based on that, that's how you should present your argument.
And then there are two more questions on loss of use that just popped up. What about access to the island was one question, and does loss of use cover loss of rental income?
So depending upon the nature of the property, whether it's a rental unit or a unit that you have, those definitions will be in your insurance policy, and each is slightly different. But I would say that you would have coverage for both loss of use and or loss of income, depending upon what type of facility you have. What was the other question?
Access to the island, could that be considered loss of use?
So that is a very, very good question. Most policies, if you initiate the wind, have a government authority component to it. And in the government authority component, there is usually a defined time, say 30 days. I think that's the standard that you would see. So if you do, but understand, I believe that it's a case that we are presenting on behalf of our clients. Even if you do not have physical damage, I believe that you can make a claim for the government authority ban for the period that your area was affected under that component of the policy, if you have coverage for that for government authority.
Okay, and one more just popped up. Could you repeat the concept of a reserve claim submitted by adjuster?
Yes, so a reserve is a professional guesstimate that the local adjuster will relay to the home office adjuster. Now understand this, almost exclusively, we have met what are known as independent adjusters. So they're kind of our opposite number in that they never represent private citizens or businesses. They only represent insurance companies. So because they're not employees of the insurance company, they don't have the ability to bind the insurance company to coverage. They don't have the ability to bind the insurance company to agreements that you may make with them on the site. However, their job is to assist the insurance company in assessing their overall exposure. So what they will do is prepare a report after their inspection to give the insurance company their quote unquote worst day number. And so what we encourage people to do and what we do is to engage in that discussion so that you know what the adjuster's thinking. That's kind of high level stuff. The adjusters may be a little offended if you ask, but it is, you know, if it's your home or your business, you want to be in dialogue with the carrier, and you want to make sure that your claim is set up for success and that you have started the process with both eyes open, so to speak.
That's a good point. Thanks for making that. You know, having been through this process, the adjuster says, I've made my report to the company, and he's going to decide, you know, what to give you. You're suggesting that you ought to see that report before it goes.
Well, I don't know that they will tell you. It's a proprietary thing.
Okay.
Understand this. The insurance company hired him. He is your agent, right?
Okay.
If you engage a public adjuster, what that adjuster will do is press him for that information.
Yes. Okay.
And understand also this. Typically in the cases that we're involved in, not only do I get the name of the field adjuster, but I get the name of the desk adjuster. And so if I don't get satisfaction with the field adjuster, I will engage the desk adjuster and make sure they know what we're thinking.
Okay, good.
Now one last thing. They're not going to roll over and say, thank God Mike Fusco told me, right? And say, let them rub my belly and say, yeah. What they will do, however, is say, hey, we've been told by the public adjuster that the reserve should be $1 million. You've only put in 700. let's have a conversation. And then they'll say, you know what, I think we're more comfortable with putting a reserve for $1.2 million. And that's how you change the
You say
dynamic,
yes.
control the narrative, and set up for success.
Okay, well, I think, thanks so much for that presentation. That was incredibly informative.
Well, thank you very much. for the
Much
opportunity.
appreciated.
Thank you very much. I hope you all have good luck, and we'll see you when the beach is open.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay,
And David, thank you for arranging this.
You're welcome.
Okay, next, let's see where we are. David, 50% rule.
Okay. I'm going to take a little time on this. I'm
You
personally.
think, you want people to take a quick break before you begin?
Sure. Yeah.
Why don't
you
we
can do
take
that.
a 5-minute break? We've been at this for almost 2 hours, so let's
Okay.
reconvene at 11.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Jay, were you saying the yacht club's planning on opening up next week?
Yes, right. Yeah, the concept is to be open from noon until 6 o'clock. And, to operate with a very limited menu. But also to provide a place where people can go to relax, have air conditioning, have internet service.
Okay.
Get a sandwich. It's not going to be a full menu, but they're hoping to open Tuesday through Friday, starting next week.
Friday. Nice.
Yeah, I hope it gets enough business to justify being open, but we
Well,
made
it's
a
kind of
decision that we've got some
little bit of
very
self-
valuable employees, and we'd rather be paying them and retaining them, during this period rather than letting them go and perhaps losing them.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of self-fulfilling, right? Like people aren't coming if nothing's open, and
Right.
people don't want to open if no one's here, right? So,
Right. Exactly.
Going back to property taxes, I checked on the tax collector's website. That's been delayed. They're supposed to be mailing them out sometime this month, and the discount will be pushed forward a month.
Well, that's good information, Ken. Thanks.
And I think the discount's going to be pushed forward till the end of January.
Well, right now, the tax collector is just saying till December, but we'll see if that changes.
Well, take a look at, put up the executive order, which covers Lee County and ad valorem and not ad valorem taxes. It basically said that it moved from November 1st for the 4% discount to the end of January. But we'll take a look at it. But yeah.
Okay, David, are you about ready to get going again, or?
Yeah, I'm ready. What I'm going to do is give a brief overview of the 50% rule, which everybody's heard about. And frankly, virtually all of us on Captiva are covered by the 50% rule. If your house was substantially damaged during the storm, or if your house is not elevated, or if your house is not elevated enough, according to current code, you are in a major way affected by this 50% rule. And my house was, and that's why I reviewed this stuff. And I'm not going to provide a legal analysis, but hopefully I can give people some direction, at least for those of us who are affected by the rule, which is a lot of us. So in short, the dreaded, as they sometimes call it, 50% rule is this. It's a federal regulation which prohibits, and I want to emphasize, prohibits repairs to a damaged home when the cost of those repairs equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the home. So if your damage, the cost of repairing that is more than or equal to 50% of the market value of your home, you are prohibited from repairing it unless your home during the course of the reconstruction is brought into full compliance with the current flood regulations, which includes elevating the home.
Is that that's a federal rule, not a state or a county?
I'll explain in a second, but
Okay.
yes, it's a federal rule that is enforced by the county. Okay? So if your house is on the ground, and if you suffered substantial damage, and we'll talk about all what this means, and you suffered substantial damage, and you want to rebuild it, and the cost of rebuilding it is equal to or more than 50% of the market value of that home, and we'll talk about market value, you are prohibited from doing it unless you meet, when you do the renovation or the repair, unless you meet current code, which means if you weren't elevated and you need to be elevated, you would have to elevate your home, whether that be 13 feet, 14 feet, 15 feet, whatever the base flood elevation that FEMA has set in your area on Captiva. Okay, and we'll get to all of that and we'll break it down. So the National Flood Insurance Act, it's Federal Act of 1968, is administered by FEMA, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. The National Flood Insurance Program was created, and it was created to provide the public with federally backed access to flood insurance. And that act was amended over time to increase the amount of flood insurance that people were entitled to, provide flood mapping programs, and to prohibit certain rate increases. But that flood insurance program was also intended to break the cycle of flood damage by raising buildings and reducing the number of buildings exposed to flood damage, thereby reducing the burden on taxpayers to provide disaster relief. So the National Flood Insurance Program was to guarantee flood insurance, but is also to prevent the need for flood insurance going forward by getting houses elevated. Okay, so this flood insurance program, which is a federal program, provides residents in Lee County and in all other participating communities with affordable insurance. Some people may think it's affordable now, but it is much more affordable than it would be without the federal program. But to get this affordable insurance, it requires the communities to meet the floodplain management regulations and requirements. So every community that needs federally backed flood insurance to be made available to its citizens must adopt and enforce the rules of the 50% rule. So if you get if your community gets flood insurance, your community has to enforce the flood insurance rules. Sanibel was the first one to join this process back in 1979. By 1984, all of Lee County was part of this program. So all of Lee County was entitled to get federally backed flood insurance, but all of Lee County had to enforce these rules, including the 50% rule. Okay, so the 50% rule and the flood insurance policies identifies the flood zones, which are called special flood hazard areas, and it establishes requirements for structures that make substantial improvements or have substantial damage. So if improvements or repairs constitute substantial improvement or substantial damage, the structure must be brought into compliance with the floodplain requirements for new construction. That means it has to be brought up to code and elevating it where it's required. If the lowest floor is below the 100-year flood elevation, the building must be elevated to that level. The only things allowed below that flood level is parking, building access, and limited incidental storage. So on Captiva, you can look on the floodplain maps and you will see that your elevation, base flood elevation, is either 13 feet, 14 feet, 15 feet, in some cases, I think even 16 feet. And to meet code, you have that lowest horizontal member has to be above that base flood elevation. There are a lot of homes on Captiva and more on Sanibel that were grandfathered before this flood insurance policy came into effect and are are on the ground, including a lot of them on Whiteman and Leica Lane and other parts of Captiva and all through Sanibel. To repair those homes, you have to meet the 50% rule. If to repair those homes are going to cost more than 50% of the market value of those homes, and I'll get to that in a second, they have to be elevated to the base flood elevation. So we talked about substantial improvement. What constitutes substantial improvement? Any reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure, the cost of which equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction. So if you're just doing a renovation, forget about a flood. You know, you're just fixing up your house, you're adding a wing, you're covered by the 50% rule because that's a substantial improvement. And if you're on the ground, for example, and you want to just add a wing to your house or add some other rooms, if you're over the 50% rule, 50% of market value, you can't do it unless you raise that whole structure up to the 14, 15, or 16 feet that's required. What constitutes substantial damage? Damage sustained by a structure whereby the cost of restoring the structure to its before damage condition would equal or exceed 50% of the market value of the structure before the damage occurred. So if you're on the ground and you got a hurricane and you got a flood and it's going to cost you, and your market value's $200,000 for the structure, and I'll get to that in a second, and it's going to cost you $150,000 to repair it, you can't do it unless you raise it up off the ground. Okay, so if your needed repairs meet this definition of substantial damage that we've been talking about, 50% of market value, your project is now considered new construction. And that's why you have to meet current code. Okay, the 50% rule looks at the market value of the structure of your house, the building, not the land value. Okay, so if your house on Zillow is worth $2 million or $2.5 million, and you go look under LIPA, you will see the value of the land and the value of the structure. They're broken out. The value of the structure, you might be surprised, the value of your land on your $2 million assessed value is $1.9 million. And the value of your home will be $100,000. And there are cases like that. But anyway, there's the value of the land and the value of the structure. To determine market value for the 50% rule, you only look at the building, not the value of the land. Okay? Is that clear?
Yep.
Okay. And I'll explain where you see those numbers in a second. When you're determining the cost of repairing your house, not everything is included. So remember, I said you can't, if the repairs are more than 50% of the market value of your house, you can't do it unless you raise it up, unless you meet current code. Well, you got to determine what's included in that 50%. And what's included in the 50% is basically most of your repairs, but it doesn't include your plans, your architectural plans that you need to create. It doesn't include surveys. It doesn't include building permits. It doesn't include driveways or sidewalks or pools or screens or sheds or gazebos or fences or seawalls or
landscaping, that not included. It's just the expenses for the house itself.
Yes, it doesn't include plug-in appliances such as washing machines, dryers, or stoves, or other items not considered a permanent part of the structure. Okay? It also doesn't include cleanup and trash removal from a hurricane or flood. So this is important. So when you get a cleanup bill and say it's $20,000 and they're taking everything out of your house, your furniture, the showers, the toilets, the tile, the muck, and everything else, you need to break out that bill as to what's actually construction related. So if they're cutting out sidewalk, drywall, that's construction related, and that would go to the 50% rule. But removing your furniture and all the wet stuff that came out, that ends up in front of your property, that's not included. So you got to get your remediation or your mediation person to separate out what is really construction and what's just removing furniture and other stuff, so that you don't burden your 50% rule by putting things that don't belong in there. And there's more detail, which we'll get on the website. Let me just say this: historical structures designated under a state or local historic preservation program, which is approved by the Secretary of the Department of the Interior, which I think a lot of ours may be on Captiva, they do not have to be brought into compliance if substantially damaged. So if there's a structure that's historically preserved, and I'm not sure about this, but I was thinking about the deputy house that the Civic Association owns. I was even thinking about the Jensen.
Yeah, the Jensen cottages are historic.
The Jensen cottages, and there are some other historic properties. They may have substantial damage that is more than 50% of market value, but they may not have to be raised if they're historically approved. So that's something, if you have a historical preservation designation, that's something you got to take a look at. And let me just say one other thing before I get to the specifics. And by the way, things have changed from the time this meeting started to right now, which I just got a report on. But the reason they came up with 50% is because it was a compromise between 0 and 100. Some people wanted nobody to rebuild unless they were going to do it according to code. People said everybody should be allowed to rebuild no matter what it's going to cost, even if it's a lot more than market value. So they cut the baby in half, and that's where the 50% rule came from. Okay, there's another problem, which is the look back period. In other words, if you had decided to do an improvement on your home, say 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you did, and you spend, say, $100,000 or $200,000 to do that, and now your home's damaged by the hurricane, and you have $200,000 worth of damage, and you say you had a $300,000, you had your value of your house was $600,000, so you 50% would be $300,000. The fact that you did the renovation 2 years ago and that cost $200,000, that was included in your calculation for the 50% rule. Lee County had a 5-year look back for determining the 50% rule. So if your construction to repair your damaged home today was 50% of your market value, but you spent $100,000 3 years ago to improve something, you're screwed. So because you're over the 50% rule. Lee County now, as a lot of other jurisdictions, are in the process of considering removing the 5-year look back period and to do it on a permit by permit basis. So prior permits that you got don't get included in determining whether you've reached or breached the 50% rule. So this morning, there was an emergency meeting of Lee County to basically repeal or amend the 5-year look back period for substantial damage and substantial improvement. And that meeting got deferred. They were holding the meeting this morning. Kevin Ruane had to leave early to go to it. Remember, you heard Jeff Powell was talking about wanting to go to one of the issues that the Board of County Commissioners was considering is removing the look back period. So that really the only thing that would a 50% rule would apply to is your current damage reconstruction costs. But that meeting got deferred, and they're going to hold again that meeting next week because there was some objections to some of the provisions by the Florida Office of Emergency Management. So the Lee County did not change anything under the 50% rule today, and it was deferred.
Well, he also talked about moving it up 15%. Was that deferred also?
And I'll get to that in a second, but
Okay,
the answer to that, Jay, is yes. Okay, so when I keep on saying 50% of market value, 50% of market value, if you're over 50% of market value, you can't build unless you build up or unless you meet current code. What does market value mean? The county determines market value, not the federal government. The county determines market value And market value in Lee County is the Lee County Property Appraiser's assessment for ad valorem taxation for the market value of your structure only. So when you go to LIPA.org, right, and you hit database search, so you go to LIPA.org, LEEPA.org, and then you go to database search, and then you enter your address and click search, and you enter your address with your zip code 33924, you click search, then your property will come up. Then you click parcel details. You'll see a tab that says parcel details. You then go to the values tab, and you click that little chart graphic to the left of the values tab heading. And in the bottom right corner, you will see the cost value of your home. It'll be the land value and the building cost value. It's the building cost value that is what you use for determining the 50% rule. I will tell you, my looks at this for Captiva homes is that the land value far, far outweighs the building value. It was almost shocking to see how what the building values are and how low they are. So in response to this, the property appraiser last week decided to issue a letter to all properties in Lee County, raising the building value amount as compared to the land value amount. And when you go into your LIPA.org, you will see on the top that there's a letter from the county appraiser basically notifying you that the building value of your home has been increased. Some of those home building values have been increased significantly. Some of them, as far as I can tell, have been increased very little, and others hardly at all. So I don't know right now what the rationale for that was, but the Lee County Property Appraiser on its own decided to raise those to a certain degree. The county today was proposing to raise the building value across the board by 15%. They were going to do a 15% adjustment to that just value of the structure, which Lee County property appraiser has set. So if the Lee County if your original appraisal value of the building was say $200,000, and your property appraiser raised it to $220,000, Lee County was proposing to add another 15% on top of that. That's what was before the Board of County Commissioners today. That did not happen. That got deferred because there was initially FEMA would not allow it to go above 15%, and that was deferred today because my understanding from a text I received is that there is the Office of Emergency Management in Tallahassee did not want to see that 15% across the board value get raised because somehow, I believe, if I had to guess, they thought it would jeopardize the guaranteed flood insurance for Lee County or for Florida. So anyway, that's been deferred. But having said all of that, in lieu of what the county appraiser says the value of your building is, you can retain your own appraiser, your own certified private appraiser, and get a private appraisal of the building, of the structure of your home. And that appraiser will do it based on the comparables that took place, the sales that took place prior to the hurricane. And for those of us who live on Captiva, I can assure you that the certified appraiser will find a much higher appraised value of your structure than what you will find in your LIPA appraisal report. And that is because, as everybody knows, prices were skyrocketing prior to the hurricane or this past summer. And so if you have an issue with the value of your building structure under LIPA, it behooves you to get a private appraisal who will look at comparable sales and do his own appraisal of your property. And that may give you a lot more leeway in rebuilding in rebuilding your house.
Does LIPA have to?
Hey, David,
accept that property?
really,
Go ahead, Bob.
Go
Bob,
ahead.
was
the
that,
fact
go
of the
ahead.
matter, yeah, the fact, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is you need to go get your own appraisal. It's worth the $750 or $1,000, whatever it is, because it's always going to be higher than what's on a county site.
Right, right. And my experience has been with people who've gotten appraisals and compared it is that is substantially higher than what's on the county site. So if you
But
have,
does LIPA have to accept that appraisal?
as long as it's you're a certified appraisal by the state, if you're a certified appraiser, they will accept it. That's my understanding.
Then if you do that, does that mean you'll be raising your property taxes in future years? Because then they'll use that higher appraisal number for your valuation?
That's a question that was asked of me before, and that has not happened in some of the cases, but I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Because that appraisal will be used for the evaluation of the 50% rule. Whether that then gets applied to your ad valorem tax base, I don't know. It may not, Jay.
And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. They're not that organized. They're not that connected. What triggers that would be the sale of your house at that current market value.
Okay.
And the new owner would be responsible for that upgrade,
Right.
the uptick in value.
Okay, so the two things that that are important to remember now is that market value, as it's determined by your LIPA, will make it very difficult for people to meet the 50% rule if their house on the ground in Sanibel or Captiva. In part, we have this unusual circumstance where probably the market value of the houses are higher than the replacement value throughout all of Captiva. Because the market values were so high. So if you really have an issue with the 50% rule and you don't want to, and you can't or don't want to meet current code and you don't or can't elevate your house, it behooves you, as Bob said, to get your own certified appraisal, which will be applied to the 50% rule. The county has not, at this point, I think they informally are doing it on a permit by permit basis rather than the 5-year look back rule. But they were going to officially eliminate that this morning, and that got deferred. And the 15% adjustment factor also got deferred. And the reason the county wanted to do the 15% adjustment factor is because for most of the county, leaving aside Captiva and Sanibel, which I think are very specific valuation issues, they didn't think there were enough certified appraisers. And Kevin mentioned, Commissioner Ruane mentioned it this morning. There weren't enough certified appraisers that can go out and reappraise every house in Lee County so that they can meet the 50% rule if they were on the ground. So what they were trying to do, what the county was trying to do is just do an across the board increase of 15% because they thought that was more realistic in terms of what the values are. But for some reason, that's been put on hold. Okay, the last piece of this, and I hope it's helpful, is the value of your improvement or repair. In other words, you know what your market value is. You're going to get your certified appraiser. You're going to use a LIPA number, and you know you can't go over 50% of the market value. But then how do you know what the cost of your repairs is going to be? And Lee County will evaluate the cost of repairs and determine if they're fair and reasonable. And they use pre-storm prices and rates. And that's what you heard the problem was. If you use pre-storm prices and rates, they're going to be a lot lower than what they're going to be post-storm. And that's an issue. If your proposed project, proposed project is close to the 50% threshold, if it clearly doesn't meet the 50% threshold, there's not going to be an issue. But if it's close to the 50% threshold to determine if it's a substantial damage, meaning 50% of the market value, then one has to submit a detailed and complete cost estimate prepared and signed by your contractor. So on the Lee County website, there's a detailed construction cost breakdown itemization package. And that has to be filled out and signed, and there's an affidavit that has to be signed by the contractor. Lee County also has on its website a FEMA calculation valuation table, which will be used to calculate costs of construction for the 50% rule. So you can look on the Lee County website to get a sense of what the cost of your repairs would be. They have some average costs for new roof, et cetera, and they have a whole breakdown so that you can fill out the forms to get a sense if you're going to meet the 50% rule.
So
So
are you saying, David, that you can use these with Lee County judges to be reasonable costs rather than what your actual bid cost is to determine the 50%?
I don't know how they're going to finally apply that now because they're in a new situation. But the answer to that on the website, it looks like they have some attributable costs associated with some particular repairs. And
Okay.
yes, so the answer is yes.
I think that, yeah, they use that as a guideline, right? You go back and your contractor says it's $12,000 to replace your roof. They're going to go, come on.
Right, but I think what they're going to do is use their numbers pre-storm numbers for repairs will be actually much lower than the actual ones. So it'll cost you more, but in terms of meeting the 50% rule, the lower numbers will be more beneficial to somebody.
Yeah, take the column that's advantageous to you.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I've learned. I don't know if that's helpful to people, but again, it's not a legal analysis. It's just the best I can ascertain of how to navigate this issue. But the first thing I would do is go onto your LIPA website and look for the valuation, the value of your building, and find that number. And when you look at that, you'll have a sense of what's possible and what's not. And I would guess if you live on Captiva and you have a house on the ground that's been on the ground for a while and you've been grandfathered from the new building code regulations that required you to elevate it, you're going to be somewhat taken aback by the value of the building value of your house on LIPA. It's going to be way out of whack from what you thought it was worth. And you might be pleased that your land value is high, but your building value will be very low. And you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that particular.
And that'll all happen as part of the permitting process for the new building. Is that correct?
Well, yes, what'll happen is that when you try to repair your home, you're going to have to not only know what the cost of the repairs are, but you're going to have it's going to be balanced against the market value of your structure. So it behooves you, once you see what LIPA thinks the market value of your structure is, it behooves you to get, as Bob Walter said, get your own appraisal because you may need a much higher number.
Right.
Okay?
And if you can't come in under 50%, then they won't give you a permit. Is that basically what'll happen?
If you can't come under 50%, then you're not going to get a permit and you're going to be required to elevate your house if it's not elevated. And it's not just elevation. There's all kinds of other code requirements that have changed over time that you'll be required to meet. And not only that, you may be elevated, but not elevated as high as the current code permits. So you may be in no better situation than a house that's on the ground. So you need to take a look at that carefully, and you need to figure out if you want to rebuild without having to demolish your house and start all over, basically, then you need to have to figure out how you do it without being substantially damaged or it's under 50% of your market value.
David,
All right.
one question from the audience. Someone's at lipa.org right now and is asking, is the building value number called cost value? And is the extra features dollar amount added to that?
No, it's on the page. It's on the value. Let me just find it. If you go to click parcel details and then you go to the values tab, in other words, you run down parcel details and then there's a values tab. And when you see the value, it says values. On the left side of the word values, there's a little graphic that looks like a little piece of paper, a chart. You click on that. That's to the left of the value heading. And then a spreadsheet will come out. It'll look like a whole bunch of numbers, pretty small. And if you go down to the bottom right side of that document, on the right corner, it'll say building cost value or the building value, I think is what it says. And you'll see the number there. It'll be right there and there'll be land and building. You want the building value.
Okay, were there any other questions for David on the 50% rule? All right, I think we're going to have a beach renourishment presentation from Nicole Sharp of Aptum. Is Nicole here?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Thank you, Nicole. So a lot of damage, I guess, has been done to our beach, and you're going to tell us how much and what we have to do to get the beach restored. Is that right?
Well, I'm just going to provide an update on the status of progress that we've conducted to date. We're still, so last week we did have our survey.
First, Nicole, let me make sure everybody understands that you are with Aptum, the engineering company that manages our beach renourishment project, and you are our, I guess, chief relationship manager. I don't know exactly what your title is, but that's your function. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I interact daily, probably with Daniel at CEPD
Right.
lately and the commissioners there.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Nicole. Go ahead.
All right. Well, as you know, at the last community panel meeting, we did present damages that were observed during our visual assessment, and we did confirm that there are substantial dune losses on the island. So last week, our survey crews were out. They were doing beach profile surveys from Redfish Pass to Blind Pass in order to collect data so we can assess and actually put a quantity and magnitude on the damages that did occur as a result of Hurricane Ian. So the data is currently being processed now, and I should have it in the next day or two. And then we will coordinate with Daniel and CEPD in order to quantify the losses and work on trying to figure out what is the next step with our funding partners. That's either the FEMA, as we discussed at last meeting, or the Corps of Engineers, and potentially the State Department of Environmental Protection. They all are cost-sharing partners post-storm. So we would work with them in order to start rehabilitating storm losses. So we need to get a quantity first before we can start working with them to get funding agreements in place to move forward to design a rehabilitation project, which would be the final step to repair the losses from Hurricane Ian on the beach side of the island. So that's pretty much where we stand. Not a lot of information, I know, since our last meeting, but until we do have the physical survey crunched, we really can't provide any quantitative value, but by the next meeting, we will have those numbers in place.
Okay, Nicole, thanks for that. Does anybody have questions for Nicole?
I do, Jay. Nicole,
Yeah.
Did I hear you right? Did you say that the Army Corps of Engineers is one of our cost share partners in renourishing this beach now after post-storm?
It could be a potential cost share partner. So they did reach out and are having conversations with us, but we're also talking to FEMA. So it's either FEMA or the Corps of Engineers. You can't utilize both. So there will be a determination of which federal agency is responsible to assist with providing us federal funding assistance for rehabilitation. And then we'll go down that route. But we're making sure we have both doors open in order to figure out which funding agency is going to be the cost sharing partner at the federal level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Nicole, thanks for that. I guess, David, we're back to you again. I know Kevin, during his presentation when we started off this morning, indicated that he was going to be heading up a total Lee County recovery plan. And I think you have some additional detail on that you want to share with everybody.
At the previous Board of County Commissioners meeting, to some people's surprise, Commissioner Ruane proposed that the county establish a task force, a multi-year task force with a single chair who would oversee the recovery of from Hurricane Ian in all of Lee County. And the task force was based on the task force that was created in Bay County after Hurricane Michael. And if you go on the website, and we'll have a link to that on our website, there's the Bay County Recovery Task Force, which is a 297-page document, which created a comprehensive recovery plan for the whole of Bay County. It had a task force of a series of leaders underneath the task force. It had a series of branches including infrastructure, health and social sciences, health and social services, housing, business recovery, natural and cultural resources, planning and capacity development. It was a multi-billion-dollar plan over a multi-year period with 332, I think, projects that were to be funded by federal and state funding to help Bay County recover. What Commissioner Ruane did is said this is a tried and true task force process, which is an overlay over the county plan, which was the staff plan to how to rebuild Lee County. And he basically got the unanimous approval of the Board of County Commissioners to establish this task force. And they're going to begin now to create the infrastructure of that task force with all its branches, with all its different areas. And what Commissioner Ruane wants to do is involve all of the community in this task force process to help rebuild Lee County. So what I can say about this is that this is going to be the envelope. This is going to be the way in which everything that gets, I think, everything that's going to get done in Lee County in terms of funding will take place through the auspices of this task force and its committees over the course of the next number of years. And when you look at the Bay County plan and its task force, you can see things like sewer to septic conversion is one of the things. Stormwater management is one of the projects that were funded under the recovery task force. Sidewalks, underground burial of underground utilities. All of that was part of the Bay County task force recovery plan. So my guess is that a lot of what we've already had planned or was in the planning process is going to be folded into this task force recovery process. And we want to make sure that we're part of that. I think it behooves us as a panel. My sense is that the panel is going to be asked on many levels to participate in this task force and to have input into the needs of Captiva. And I think it'll be our responsibility to put those things together. And that means not only things like sewer and stormwater management, things we've been talking about for a while, or sidewalks or whatever, but it also includes the needs of the sheriff. It also includes the needs of the fire department, also includes the needs of any, mental health needs we may have, or anything else that we need for seniors on Captiva. We need to put that together, and we'll get a better sense of how Commissioner Ruane and how the county wants us to do this over the coming weeks ahead. But I just want people to understand that this was a very big deal at the county level. Commissioner Ruane, in asking to be chair and agreeing to be chair, waived his right to his rightful place to be the chair of the Board of County Commissioners during this process, because he thinks this is going to be the most important thing he can do in his tenure as a county commissioner, is to help Lee County and Sanibel and Captiva recover from this hurricane. So we'll figure out how best to help him and how to help ourselves and participate in this process over the coming months as this becomes clearer and clearer about how it will happen. But we'll put some stuff on the website about it. But it was a very interesting phenomenon, and it's one that I think we have to be attuned to. Jay?
So this will be a major opportunity, I think, for Captiva to accomplish a lot of the things that we've been working on the past several years, and provide a vehicle for us to get many of these projects done. And also having Commissioner Ruane in the leadership of this will, I think, work to our advantage to have him leading this project. So a lot more to learn on that, but I think it's going to that's a very, very important development for Captiva.
I agree.
Okay.
Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is John. Hey, as far as debris pickup, as far as you know, is it Crowder Gulf that is hired by FEMA to do the debris pickup? And are they going into all the private, like Sunset Captiva, picking up everything on all the roads?
Okay, the answer is that Lee County contracted with Crowder Gulf to do all the debris pickup, and it's being funded, paid for by FEMA. So the FEMA pays for Crowder Gulf, but the contract is between, as far as I understand it, between Lee County and
Right.
Crowder.
That's how I understand it also.
And there was a little controversy about the cost of the Crowder Gulf contract with Lee County, but that's behind us now. But FEMA is paying for that process. My understanding, John, is that FEMA, that Crowder Gulf will be picking up first vegetative debris and then construction debris, and eventually some sand debris, which I'll get to in a second, from not only the county maintained roads, but also the private streets. And that would include Whiteman and Leica Lane. It was also include Sunset Captiva. And we made a call, a couple of us made a call just to remind the county that Sunset Captiva those streets inside Sunset Captiva have to be, the debris has to be picked up from those streets. And that should be happening today and tomorrow. And if it's not, you should let me know, because it's definitely been under discussion with the county to make sure they remember that Crowder Gulf has to be instructed to do that. I think wherever the garbage trucks go, the Crowder Gulf should go. We also were there was a little confusion about sand removal. Crowder Gulf we understood was going to remove the sand after they got the construction debris and the vegetated debris off. And then yesterday, there was some confusion about what role the Department of Transportation of Lee County was going to play in removing the sand. There have been some residents who have been concerned about the amount of sand, for example, at the Jensen's Curve or in other places on Captiva. And my understanding now is that because of the need to move the sand rather quickly to help with this recovery process, that the Lee County Department of Transportation is going to be assisting with the removal of that sand. And then we were told last night, someone had told us that the Department of Transportation would only be removing sand from the county maintained roads, which would preclude some of the private streets, including Sunset Captiva. But then we received a text during the course of this meeting from Daniel Munt, who received the text from the Solid Waste Department of Lee County and advised Daniel that, which confirms what I was told, that the sand will be removed from all of the streets on Captiva, including the private streets. So in answer to your question is yes, the debris removal and the sand removal will be removed from all of the streets where appropriate on Captiva.
And then that's starting today, isn't it? Didn't we hear that earlier in the meeting that they were planning to start that today?
Yes, yes.
And Dave, as far as you know, should we put like vegetation, appliances, construction, electronics all out on the street now in separate piles, or wait till the vegetation's picked up?
No, I think if you have room, I would put, there's going to have to be more than one pass, obviously, because as soon as the debris is picked up, more debris gets put out because more homeowners are returning and they're rehabilitating their homes. But I think if you have room, I would put them out and separate them. I know, for example, that they're already picking up both vegetation debris and construction debris as we speak. So I think it behooves you, as long as you can separate them out, to do that and to put it out.
Yeah, they need to be separated into different piles by type of debris.
All right, thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've got a little bit of other panel business to do, but before we leave the state of affairs of everything, I'm starting to get some feedback that our cell service has begun deteriorating again, and I just want to put that out there to see if we're starting to experience significantly deteriorated cell service versus what we had after cell service was restored. Can anybody give me feedback on that?
AT&T is not as good as it was. If I drive down to the Chadwick's parking lot, it's good enough for me to do internet work. Over the weekend, it was really worse. It's gotten a little better, but I still can't do any internet from my home through my
Well,
cell.
yeah. Anybody else?
I spoke to Mike Zawicki about it. He said there were a couple of days last week. He has AT&T. There were a couple of days last week where service was really bad, but something went down and then it improved again. And it's, you know, it became better than, it's not
Okay.
perfect, but it was better than it was when it went down. That's what I was.
Yes.
I agree with that, David. There was a couple of days when there was like no service, and I'd heard something went down, and it's now been repaired, and it's back to, I'd say, the usual unreliable service.
The usual unreliable service we're accustomed to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But there was like a couple, like a few hours where there was zero service.
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to try to get some feedback on that before we proceed. So we've got a few remaining items.
Jay,
On
on
the,
recovery- Jay,
Yes.
can I bring up one thing on recovery? We had talked about this, that we're not getting an overall post-Ian analysis of the island. CEPD is doing the beach part. I spoke with a couple people and they suggested I get a ROM. I got a ROM proposal from Cheryl if the panel is interested in looking at it from the island perspective, not just the beach perspective.
What is a ROM proposal?
Rough order of magnitude.
Oh,
I don't know if you're interested in it or not, or we want to talk about it offline, or what you want to do.
I don't know. Does anybody have, I'm not sure exactly what, you know, what all that would entail and what the benefit, maybe we should do that offline
Okay.
for the
fine.
next meeting.
Okay.
And that's probably going to relate to the recovery plan, which we have to learn more about, you know, as some meat is put on that skeleton. We just heard about the skeleton today from Kevin.
Okay.
But I think that'll give us some direction on what we might want to do also.
Yeah, I would suggest you get Jay, maybe you appoint 2 or 3 people, or even 2 as a fact-finding subcommittee, just to meet with Cheryl and get a sense of what kind of proposal that is and what it would entail and what the practical implications could be for Captiva going forward.
Okay. Well, Linda, you want to take charge of that and, you know, get some more information on that, and then let you and I, you know, talk, and then we'll probably bring it up at the next panel meeting.
Okay.
Okay, David, you had some updates on we're supposed to do nominating committee. Linda? Yes.
I'll try.
You are head of our panel nominating committee.
I'm ahead of the
So you want to
panel.
bring everybody up to date on where we are for getting panel nominees for next year?
Sure, okay, so we have 5 openings for the panel for next year. There are 3 different groups that nominate people. One is the Captiva Property Owners Association. There are, who has 2 openings, I think.
And they have they have decided who their people are going to be.
And the CCA has 1, and then the panel has 2. The 2 that the panel has can nominate currently are filled by John Jensen and Tony Lapp, who would like to serve again. We also got 3 excellent.
Yeah, I reviewed those resumes. They are outstanding
They
people.
are outstanding people. I couldn't say more. One is a former mayor. We've got CEOs. We've got entrepreneurs. All people who would bring a lot to the panel. Their names are Sarah McClure, Bob Weissman, and Chris Leadham. our committee has met, and we would like to recommend that the continuation of the current members. But we are so pleased with the quality of the volunteers. We urge, if the panel agrees, then we would just urge them to get more involved with the panel business because they have a lot to offer to our community.
Yes, now, so what you're doing right now is you're saying the nominating committee is proposing that John Jensen and Tony Lappy be reappointed to
Yes.
additional terms of 3 years. And then we
Yes.
vote on that in December. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but we do have
I
these.
wanted to say that the people who volunteered are outstanding.
Yes, I've read the resumes. They are outstanding people. It will be very difficult though, when we have had, such great work from Tony and John in the past to not reappoint them for another term, which they're eligible for, but
Yeah.
we'll make our final determination. We do the vote in December. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but it's likely the panel will vote to reappoint Tony and John, but I just want to say to the other 3 people, you have outstanding resumes, and there will be significant opportunities for you to start becoming involved in the panel, do some of our committee work, probably in relation to this total county recovery plan that Kevin is going to start up. So we really appreciate, those 3 applications.
Yes.
Okay. David, you got a couple of other items to finish up with?
Yeah, let me update, it'll take not long. We received notice from the county that the Manatee Protection Zone ordinance, which makes Roselle Channel a slow speed zone through the whole of Roselle Channel, which was removed after Hurricane Irma, but we all thought it should be reinstated. That ordinance was crafted. It was submitted to the Board of County Commissioners. It passed through a consent agenda, and there'll be a public hearing on it. There doesn't seem to be any opposition. So within a month or 2, I suspect that the Roselle Channel will be a slow speed zone as it was in the past throughout all of the Roselle Channel. That was something we had recommended more than 2 years ago, and it took a while for it to work its way through the channels, but that, excuse the pun, but that has happened, and that's a good thing. And Steve Boutel was very instrumental in pushing that through and being committed to that process. And he's worked with the county natural resources, and that's terrific. We were also advised by the county that the farmers market ordinance is going to be approved to allow for a farmers market all year. But it does have that requirement that no more than 20% of the vendors can be selling non-agricultural and non-farmers market goods, which will keep it as a farmers market as opposed to a flea market. That was also one of our recommendations, and that was also included in the farmers market ordinance. And we've been advised by the county that they're going to send us their final edits on the parking, noise, golf cart, and fertilizer ordinances that we've been working on for the last number of years, and it got put on hold because of the hurricane. But we'll have a final edits on that, and I'll come back to the panel at the appropriate time. And just one last thing is that the effluent study that Sanibel has to do to see what they do with the effluent from if we connect to the Sanibel sewer system at Donax. That effluent study, which is about a $45,000 study that they will have to do to see how to dispose of that additional effluent from Captiva. That's going to be approved. It was supposed to be approved the 3 days before the hurricane. It obviously didn't, and so that study will be approved by Lee County Board of County Commissioners at the December meeting. It will then be approved by Sanibel at the same time. So what's happening is that the Captiva Community Panel is getting $45,000 from the county, pursuant to an agreement with us. And then we have an agreement with Sanibel to pay the $45,000 to Tetra Tech as they do the study undertaken on Sanibel. And that,
Okay.
which was a year before the hurricane, will now be completed within the next month. And that's it.
Okay. All right, does anyone from the panel have additional comments that they would like to make before we adjourn the meeting?
There have been a couple questions.
Oh,
that
yes,
have come
good,
in.
thank you.
One just came in about, and maybe someone will know who's been on the island. Has mosquito control been covering the island?
I don't know the answer to that. Does anybody?
I haven't seen them.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be.
And the other question was related to the yacht club, Jay, that you mentioned before. If people are not members, can they access the yacht club when it reopens?
No, I believe that it's just members only. If I find out that's wrong, we can put out a notice to everybody, but I think it's just, it's for the members of the club. But I think people can certainly join the club if they want to.
Are you hosting guests, Jay?
What? Yeah, well, you
Are
can
you
bring
hosting?
guests. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the yacht, have lunch at the yacht club, give me a call. I'll take you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, folks, well, we've had a long panel meeting. I think it's been productive. I've learned quite a bit today. There's a lot of important things going on now. So would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Actually, Jay, I had one more question that
Oh,
just
yes,
popped
okay,
up.
go ahead, please.
Has anyone heard any expectations of restaurants reopening?
No, I have not.
Would you like me to speak to that?
I think that
Yes,
would be
Sandy,
appropriate.
that would be good. Yes.
Okay, hi. Well, I was just on my way out and I was meeting somebody and their hurricane passed. They weren't able to get it. So now I turned around. So I'm waiting for them before the bridge. But we plan on reopening the cantina first, but I did order a food truck so I can park it. And because I know that we need food on the island. And but the cantina seems to have the least amount of any kind of damage. And so I'm really hoping to have that open with at least a food truck in front of it, within the next couple of weeks. But then the next one opening, I think, would be either the Sunshine Cafe or RC Otters. But it's not a whole lot of point of opening a bunch of restaurants if you don't have any tourists, if you don't have anybody there. There's no point to that at all. So that's what I'm trying to just open it as need be. And I do have a lot of remodeling and so on to do at Key Lime. And that one's probably going to be the last one opening because it needs the most, but it's not for fear of the 50%, thankfully. So that's the one good thing I've been able to find out so far.
Okay, but it'll be a while. Do you have any expected time frame on when? Well, I guess your biggest problem is no tourists. How much business are you going to have?
Exactly. I'm gauging that totally. What Bob Walter talked about at South Seas, and when Twin Waters can actually be open for tourists and not just hosting disaster workers, and a lot of it has to do how many houses are back in the rental program. So much of my customer base are from those the houses, right. And so and the people that are there that have been exhausting themselves working on their houses all day, a lot of times they're just want to flop in bed at night. They don't want to go out to a restaurant. So it's really.
I don't know. I'd sure like Key Lime to be open for me to come by.
I'd like something open. I'd love to go out to eat.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Sandy, if we each promise to visit you at least 3 times a week, will you open something?
Yeah. Okay, sounds like a plan. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Any other questions left unaddressed, Ken?
Nope, that's all of them.
Okay, can I have a motion to it?
Hey Jay, there's one thing I just want to raise the we talked about widening the road or putting a sidewalk along the side of the road or shoulder or whatever, and a lot of pushback from the community, especially because of all the vegetation and things like that. And obviously, a lot of that's now gone. And so I think it's worth re-looking at that, like especially along Captiva Drive. And if you know, the S curves, a lot of the vegetation's been wiped out. And so I think now's the time to really, you know, we have a window of opportunity here to relook at that, I think.
Okay.
Good point.
Especially
Yeah,
the
well-
S curves.
Right. David, what do you, you know, your sidewalk project, I assume that's just gone silent for a while now, or?
It was on silent because we were gonna do the stormwater management plan, which would basically dig up the existing stormwater, the drainage system, which was under the sidewalk. So they're gonna be, they're one and the same. We're getting a new stormwater management proposal around November 18th from Kimley Horn. And I think that will get folded into the task force, as will the sewer project. And I agree with Bruce, we should revisit the bicycle path issue now and get a look and see how the hurricane has affected that, if at all. And if in fact that's doable in a way that is acceptable to the community, then that would be folded into our task force recovery projects as part of what we're doing on Captiva.
Right.
So I behooves us to take a look at that again, only because conditions may have changed.
Right. Well, I think we're going to learn a lot, you know, about this new task force, you know, recovery program initiative that Kevin's going to lead. David, I guess we'll start learning more about that in the next several days.
Yeah, we will.
Well, I think we should, you know, as soon as we're learning more about that, we need to start thinking how we're going to participate in that as a community. And
Right, and see what's legitimate to fold into that and what isn't.
right.
I suspect a lot of our longstanding projects will neatly fold into that. The other thing you might want to mention, you know, Jeff Powell made a connection between Jay and FEMA.
Oh, yes, I can report on that. Yeah, I talked to the fella that I guess is supervising a lot of FEMA's efforts in the area. And but what he's basically telling me is that FEMA is basically a funding source. It's not an action source itself. In other words, the county has to come to FEMA and propose projects that it needs. And then FEMA, you know, considers those projects for funding them. So I don't know if there's a whole lot that would be gained by having a session, you know, with FEMA, because, you know, they're just going to talk about, you know, funding, not about, you know, projects, you know, and so I don't see a lot of value in that. The one thing I did learn from that is they have an office open in Sanibel to assist individual homeowners if anybody needs their support. I would have assumed that that was just part of Sanibel's, you know, recovery operation, but the FEMA office that's open in Sanibel on Periwinkle Way now is for all people in the area, not just Sanibel residents.
Jay, I just opened up the task force from Bay County, and there's a section called Appendix A, which is called FEMA Public Assistance Damage Inventory Estimates. And they have the costs that FEMA is going to pay for the various sections of the recovery. So just so you get a sense, debris removal in Bay County was $639 million. Emergency protective measures going forward, $211 million. Roads and bridges, $137 million. Water control facilities, improvements to water, $53 million. Public facilities, $424 million. Utilities like burying cables, et cetera, $96 million. And parks and recreation, $156 million. So those are all FEMA funded projects, cost related projects in Bay County. So that's what role FEMA is going to play. So I guess what's going to happen is, and they had 332 projects. I don't know how many were
Right.
FEMA. But our job working with the county is to access those funds with projects that make sense for not only the recovery.
Right, but the point is though, that FEMA does not initiate those projects.
No, they
No,
just
we
pay.
do, and they pay for them.
Exactly. Just like our debris removal now is Crowder Gulf in a contract with Lee County, but is paid for by FEMA.
Right. Okay, can we adjourn?
We can.
All right. Okay.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right, second.
Okay.
Thank you,
I will
everybody.
see everybody next month. Thank you all so much.
Everyone, thanks, Jay.
Okay. Bye-bye.